Hey everyone, I'm here with Jayden, a young man who identifies himself as an Orthodox Jew, and I'm here to have a conversation, debate regarding Orthodoxy and the Oral Torah, and I'll present you to him. I'll present him to you right now so that he can present his argument.
Okay, great. So my take here is a couple things is that there's multiple laws in the written Torah that you cannot understand without oral interpretation, that you literally would not be able to fulfill at all. And these are multiple fundamental laws that are obligated by God. My second claim is that we see oral Torah predating Mishnah. So we know its existence historically before Mishnah and before these innovations that are actually historically documented by multiple people. And my third claim is the following written only presents multiple problems because of many verse contradictions. And these verse contradictions are not resolved unless using the oral Torah's 13 principles that we see in Gemara. So without utilizing those, you'll not be able to solve those issues. Those are my claims.
Okay, I mean, those are all fine and good. Obviously, I would dispute every one of those claims. So, can I ask you to give an example of what makes the written Torah not understandable, and what is the proof of the oral Torah going before the Mishnah, and what verse contradictions do you find in the Torah?
Okay, great. So to start off with just examples of things you literally can't understand and don't have instructions for is there's a couple things. Easy one is like, for example, the slaughter laws. So we know it's called shechita in Hebrew. That refers to how you're supposed to shecht an animal for it to be considered kosher. And we see, for example, in Devarim, Deuteronomy 12:21, you're commanded to slaughter as I have commanded you. There's no further follow-up on how to actually perform the shechita itself. That's all we see. Now, like I have commanded you is implying that there was a command that was outside the written Torah, because we do not see a further understanding of how to actually slaughter that animal. So that would be the first thing that I'd bring up.
So let's go through each argument one by one, okay?
Right.
So you bring up this argument about the slaughtering. The Torah says, "You shall slaughter from your sheep and from your cattle, as I commanded you." Your claim here, which is not your claim, it's the Talmud's claim, that as I commanded you is referring to a secret special form of slaughter that was passed on orally by the Jewish people, and only if you slaughter your animals this way will your food be kosher. Now, what I'm going to tell you is that, first of all, nowhere in the Torah is there a requirement to slaughter your animals a specific way. In fact, the Torah only discusses laws regarding which animals you can eat. However, it never specifies a specific way to kill them. Now, you reference this chapter and verse. It's chapter 12, right? Deuteronomy.
Is let me pull it up exactly. It is chapter
Yeah, so here it is, chapter 12,
12:21.
verse 21. Okay, so we have to provide some context over here because the big problem with this rabbinic argument is that it takes the verse out of context. And this is the context. God in the book of Leviticus, chapter 17, commands the Israelites to bring all of their offerings, and specifically their domesticated offerings, to the temple in order to offer them as a sacrifice. So, do you have a Torah with you?
Oh yes, I
Okay,
do.
so turn to Leviticus chapter 17.
Okay.
So in Leviticus chapter 17, the chapter begins.
Yeah, I
God
see it.
spoke to Moses, says, "Speak to Aaron and his sons, and to all the children of Israel, and tell them, any man from the house of Israel who shall slaughter a ox or a sheep or a goat in the camp or outside of the camp, but they do not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting." So for anyone who doesn't know, the entrance of the tent of meeting is the tabernacle, right? The temple. If they don't bring it to the tabernacle, then it will be considered as if they spilled blood, and that man will be cut off from the midst of his people. This is verse 5. So that the children of Israel shall bring their sacrifices, which they sacrifice on the face of the field, they should bring them to the tent of meeting, to the priest, and they shall slaughter them as peace offerings to Yahweh. And it should be a offering, it should be a sacrifice. Verse 7, they shall no longer slaughter to the demons, which they stray after them. This is an eternal decree. They must bring their sheep and their cattle to the temple. Now, however, when it comes to so those are domesticated animals, right? Sheep, cattle, those are domesticated animals. When it comes to non-domesticated animals, which are still kosher, like a deer, for example, that is different. So you can now fast forward to verse 13. Any man from the children of Israel or from the sojourner, the convert, who shall capture an animal or hunt an animal, then all you have to do is just spill the blood and cover it with dirt, and you can eat it. So there's a distinction being drawn between domesticated animals and non-domesticated animals. Okay? Domesticated animals need to be brought as a sacrifice. Now, when you turn to Deuteronomy chapter 12, we're being told there's an expansion of the law here. See, because what happens when the children of Israel enter the land, they're going to be spread across the whole land. And if every time they want to eat their sheep or their cattle, if every time they want to eat, they have to bring it to the temple, that's really not a feasible option. So what's being told to us here, and so go look at chapter 12, verse 14, right? Or rather, verse 13. It says, beware for yourself, lest you shall offer up your elevation offerings wherever you see. Rather, you should bring it to the place that God chooses amongst one of your tribes, and there you shall bring up your offerings. However, this is verse 15, whenever your soul desires, you shall slaughter and eat meat, as the blessing of Yahweh your God is upon you. The pure person and the impure person together can eat it, like the deer and the hart. So the deer and the hart are non-domesticated animals, which already from the time of Leviticus were permitted to be eaten as regular offerings. Sorry, as regular food. However, if you're eating an offering, you have to be pure, right? You have to be ritually pure. What's being said here in chapter 15, in verse 15 of chapter 12 is that you can eat whenever your soul desires, you can slaughter your animals and eat it as you would eat the deer and the hart. So in verse 21, when God says, and specifically it starts off in verse 20, where it says, God expands your borders, and you shall say, I want to eat meat. Whenever your soul desires to eat meat, you can eat meat. If the place is far away from you, the place that God chooses, the temple, right? Well, then you can just slaughter from your cattle and from your sheep, which God gave to you as I commanded you, and you can eat in your gates whenever your soul desires. However, as you eat, or maybe even a better translation would be, indeed, as you eat the deer and the hart, so shall you eat your domesticated animals, the pure person and the impure person together. So I understand this is a lot, but it's kind of necessary just to understand what's being said here, which is that God initially did not allow the Israelites to eat their domesticated animals outside of the temple. In Deuteronomy, we're being told that once the borders are expanded, God is giving the right to the Israelites to eat whenever they want. And specifically in verse 21, when it says, as I commanded you, the best place to point, because whether or not you believe in the Oral Torah or not, the first place you have to look is within the Torah, right? If God says, as I commanded you, it's first check in the Torah. Where did God say that you can eat whenever your soul desires? In verse 15 of the very same chapter, right? And so you need to understand that the Torah is referring back to itself. It's not referring to some external source, and it's not referring to a special way of slaughter. It's referring to the fact that you're allowed to eat your domesticated animals whenever your heart desires, your soul desires, and you don't have to bring it to the temple.
You're saying, as I commanded you, is referring to
Verse
previously
15. Yeah, verse 15.
in Leviticus or Deuteronomy?
Deuteronomy, verse 15 of the very same chapter. I was just giving you Leviticus for context of how the law is being changed and why this all needs to be said. But more specifically, it's pointing to verse 15 of the very same chapter. And that's verse 15 is where this statement is initially said. whenever your soul desires, you can eat meat, right? And so in verse 21, it's saying, repeating, as I commanded you, you can eat meat wherever you like.
So it's verse okay, so whenever you desire, you may slaughter and eat meat in any of your settlements according to the blessings that your God Hashem has granted you. So that's the first. And when we move to
verse 21, it's saying, as I commanded you in verse 15.
It's too far from you. You may slaughter any of the cattle or sheep. I shall give you as I've instructed you, and you may eat your heart's content in your settlements. So your argument is making a distinction between the it's like allowing a separate thing now. So it's allowing.
Well, the whole purpose of this chapter is to tell us that even though initially in Leviticus chapter 17, we're told that you can only bring your domesticated animals to the temple as an offering, now that the expansion of the borders and the people are living in the land spread out, they can't always bring their meat to the temple. So God is allowing them to say, okay, you can eat whenever your soul desires. And he's specifically saying that in verse 15, he's saying it first, and then in verse 21, it's saying, repeating this as I commanded you in verse 15.
Okay, so I understand your interpretation of that. I think that there's better arguments that I have that could be addressed that are more vague, because I understand how that one you can get context from.
Yeah, but also here's the important point, right? Which is that on the basis of an interpretive battle, which again, I'm pointing you to an explicit verse, no less than a couple of verses previously, 6 verses previously, we're seeing this verse. On the basis of that, we're going to have kosher slaughterhouses. We're going to have kosher meat being triple the price. We're going to tell Jews that they're not allowed to eat meat anywhere unless it's certified by a rabbi, unless it's slaughtered in some specific special way. In fact, this commandment here is being given to the Jewish people as a way to make their life easier, and the rabbis have jumped upon this as an opportunity to make people's lives harder. You know, the kosher meat thing is probably one of the most difficult, inconvenient practices amongst Orthodox Judaism. So, you know, this is all very serious, and it affects people's lives, and all on the basis of, you know, this secret special knowledge that we have that's not the Torah, when if a Jew is really just trying to follow what God says, you only need to follow the written word of God. But go ahead, you can bring another example.
Well, I'll add more to this one. So we see, for example, like even the phrase "as I commanded you," like we see like Exodus 39:43, where we see like just as the Lord had commanded Moses, and everything like we see also in Numbers 15, everything that the Lord has commanded you.
But everything is spelled out.
But
Right? What the Lord has
it implies
commanded.
a prior known command, and we see like even even the word vizavachta, it's implying ritual slaughter. Zavach is not it doesn't imply general killing. It specifically implies a ritual slaughter, and we can see this even
Because previously this was commanded to be, all of your animals had to be ritualistic. But now we're saying, even from the point of view of your domestic animals being supposed to be ritual slaughters according to the previous law, we're now being given the green light to eat your animals wherever you like.
So, but how do you do the ritual slaughter according to the Torah?
No. The ritual is not the form. Again, this is the what is incorrect. It's not referring to the type of slaughter. It's referring to the sacrificial element of the animal, right? As in, mizbeach means altar, and zevach shlamim, for example, means a peace sacrifice. So it's a sacrificial offering. It has nothing to do with the type of slaughter. This is again the misnomer. Nowhere do we see that there is a special way to slaughter your animals. That's not
if it's referring to a sacrificial offering, then I would ask you, after the temple's destruction, how would you give a sacrificial offering?
You can't. The Torah makes it very clear you can only bring sacrifices to God in the temple. However, God is also making it clear here in Deuteronomy chapter 12 that you are allowed to eat meat outside of the temple.
So I would argue that point with Hosea 14:2. So we see it with Hosea 14:2. Hosea says that when like he's referring to in a time of exile, that we will render the sacrifices of the bullocks through the lips, which is referring to a structure of prayer for sacrifices and the way we sacrifice animals. So in that case, we see Hosea is pointing to a way to sacrifice after the destruction of the temple, and it would also put into question what we have like Psalms 105 verse 8 to 10 and Leviticus 18 when referencing a covenant that shall be kept eternally and kept forever and is forever. If the covenant is forever, that means the laws apply forever. So that would cause a problem.
Well, yeah, the laws still apply. Yet part of the law is that you need to bring your offerings in the temple in the place that God chose to mention his name, to rest his name. We don't have that place currently at this time. So it's a technical issue. And as far as Hosea goes, there's only two options for Hosea. Either Hosea is speaking metaphorically, in which he's saying that despite the fact that we don't have the ability to sacrifice literally, at least, at the very least, we can use our lips to make offerings to God. But if he's actually claiming that the sacrificial offerings of the temple can literally be replaced through prayer, that's just false, right? No one who comes past the Torah has the ability to add or subtract to the law. The law says very clearly that you must bring literal animal sacrifices. Also, you must bring it to the place that God chooses. So we don't have the place that God chooses. We don't have a temple. If we did, we would still have to bring offerings. And we just simply cannot fulfill these commandments as a matter of practicality, not as a matter of belief.
Well, the thing is, God says, they will build for me a temple and I will dwell in them. Referring to the people. And you
Well,
would
no,
have to
the correct translation, I will dwell in their midst.
so again, we can pull up the Hebrew word of that. But again, the the idea that Hosea is saying, how would you interpret what Hosea is saying? When you mean metaphorically, what do you mean by that? Because if you're following written only, which
I don't believe that the prophets have the ability to change the law. I don't believe that anyone has the ability to change the law. As it says very clearly in Deuteronomy, do not add or subtract to these commandments. So I don't care who comes after, whether it's a prophet or a rabbi. If they are making any change to the law, they're immediately invalid. So,
well, I wouldn't say change.
I respect Hosea a lot more than the rabbi, so I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt that he's not changing the law by saying, now we can fulfill the offerings through words. I don't think he actually believes that. He knows that the sacrifices are literal. I think maybe he's just saying, as an attempt to maintain our sacrificial connection with God, we can do that through our words. I would say you can do that through your actions too. There are ways to make sacrifices to God in your own life, whether through prayer or through action. That always applies whether or not we have a temple. However, in no way can you say that prayer replaces the temple offerings, considering that the commandment for the temple offerings is extremely literal.
Well, it's not changing it like you think, like subtracting the commandment. It's fulfilling it in a time of exile when certain things can't be met to fulfill it physically. You need it through prayer. Now, if you're following the Karaite logic, which is that we're going to take the written Torah literally to the literal sense every time, you can't deny the prophet's words. If Hosea is removing from the Torah, he would be kind of like Korach and how Korach was removing, and that's why him and his followers were perished. You have to acknowledge Hosea as being an actual prophet and his words mean
So
something. So
that's
I
why
don't think you can argue that.
I'm not exactly a Karaite in the sense that I'm not going to be held accountable to every word in the Old Testament. I don't believe that the Old Testament is binding law from God. I believe that it's history, it's prophecy, it's metaphor, it's wisdom. But I don't believe that we are obligated to follow every word, and I don't think it's necessarily very reliably sourced the same way the Torah is. The Torah is again the foundation of the entire Bible, and the Torah is the law that you should not add or subtract to. We know what the laws of sacrifices are. Nowhere in the Torah does it say that you can fulfill the sacrifice of a goat with your words. That's absurd. That's not actually real. So either
This is that
Hosea
again.
is making a metaphorical point or he's just wrong.
Again, but that's the time, first of all, when there's a temple present, number one. And number two, your previous statement of saying, well, I don't believe that we have to follow the Torah forever, or
I
that
didn't say that.
well, repeat what you said before. That's what I heard.
I don't believe that we are bound by the entire Old Testament, as in by the Nach, by the prophets and the writings after the Torah. I believe we're only bound by the Torah, the five books of Moses.
So you don't think the prophet's words have any credibility and any
They don't have any credibility, but they don't have the ability to bind us in the same way that the Torah does, especially when they're saying things that contradict the Torah. So if you wanted to understand Hosea as being like, well, because we don't have a temple, now we're fulfilling the obligations through words, if that's your understanding of Hosea, that's an incorrect statement. That the Torah doesn't support such an idea that you can replace the the obligated ritual offerings with words. I would say we still are obligated to bring these sacrifices. We just can't because the condition to bringing these sacrifices is bringing it to the temple, and we don't have a temple.
So if you're still obligated to fulfill the sacrifices and you can't,
Mhm.
then aren't you going to get a repercussion for that? Again, obligation means that
Possibly.
you're, so how is that justly fair? How is
I
that
mean,
just and fair by
we
God?
have to trust that God is a fair judge. He tells us as much. He tells us that he's merciful and compassionate, and neither I or you have the ability to build the temple. Although I do think there are repercussions for the nation of Israel living in the land of Israel, not giving a damn about the Torah. I think that does have repercussions, as we can see.
So I'll change to my second argument here. I think we covered a good amount here. I want to go into more specific laws that I think need more clarification. So, for example, I think a good one would be not even a law, just actually it is a law, prohibition. So an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, right? So if you're taking the Torah literally in the written sense, it literally means an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Now, the problem with that, and that the Gemara brings up, and that we see in Talmud, which is an important case to clarify whether it's referring to a literal eye for an eye or tooth for a tooth, or by compensation. We see that if a blind person takes out someone's eye, is it now fair to take out that person's eye if he's blind? If he's blind, the compensation is not the same because he already does not have vision while he took your vision. So the trade is not the same. And even if you look at the Vilna Gaon, who is a famous sage, he says read it tachat, under the actual word for an eye. When you read it under, it becomes the word kesef, which means money. If you actually look under the word and you follow the letters down, it becomes the word kesef. If you literally read it literally,
That
an
sounds like a joke. Not to mention, it also says nefesh tachat nefesh, which means a soul instead of a soul. Tachat means underneath and instead of. So you have to learn how to speak language. And I don't know what underneath the letter, that just sounds like
yeah,
nonsense.
underneath the word,
What
underneath.
underneath what word?
So we'll pull up the verse actually. Let me pull it up. And
Yeah,
also, while I'm doing that, you want to tell me how you interpret that verse?
yeah. Again, I mean, it's like saying, what if a homeless person who has no money and no family and no life, he's just a nothing, lives under a bridge and kills a man who's a rich, wealthy father of 12. So how is it just to kill the homeless person? That doesn't it's not equal punishment. The point is you're not here to create equality of punishment. You're here to fulfill God's law. And again, by the way, we'd have to even uh, talk about like why are we bringing up the most extreme rare case of a blind person that takes out a seeing person's eye, right? Already you're looking for a case to undermine the Torah's law. But the point is,
Well, it's meant to
what if
quench.
what if someone who's like almost dead, right? Like he's terminally ill, kills someone who's not terminally ill. So if you kill him, it's not fair. He's about to die anyway. Oh, no, that's the penalty,
Well,
like
in that case, that would be his punishment would be after he dies in heaven. But when we're referring to specifics,
well, you don't think God will take care of the blind man who managed in his blindness to blind someone else? This is
what
the
do you
whole
mean?
point is who
We're
made
talking
this
about a
law?
perfect fact.
Who
We're not
made these
talking.
laws?
Well, we're
God
not
made
talking
the law.
about an onus. Again, like we're not saying the blind person accidentally removed his eye. We mean a
I understand.
purposeful action.
I
So
understand.
again, is that fair? So you have to ask yourself. If
I
you
mean,
take that
there's
literally, is
not
that fair?
much you
Or
can
unfair?
do, right? There's not much you can do. Again, is it fair if a terminally ill person kills someone who's young and healthy? Is that fair? If you put the terminally ill 85-year-old to death, is that fair? It's not fair. Nothing's fair about this whole situation. Someone was murdered, someone got blinded, but you can only deal with the levels of punishment that we have available to us. You
But
know,
what that shows though is that the written Torah is lacking something, and
Oh,
that it
really?
does
So,
not
so I'm
apply.
out. So what about in my case? When the terminally ill guy kills the young healthy person, does he also have to pay money to balance it out, or do you just put him to death because that's the penalty?
You mean, well, that's not an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth isn't the same as unaliving someone.
Absolutely is. It's actually written in the same breath. You shall give a soul for a soul, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, a bruise for a bruise. So the point is that this is equal justice. Someone kill someone, they deserve the death penalty, right? A murderer deserves to be put to death. That's the Torah's law, right? Yet you can easily create a case where there's inequality between the murderer and the murdered, yet there's still not much you can do. I don't think that money is what's being spoken of here. If it was money, there are places in the Torah where the Torah talks about monetary compensation. This is not a case of monetary compensation.
These laws, again, these laws itself are applying to when you're alive. If you're thinking with someone after he dies, that is in God's hands now because he's
But
not
after
actually
he dies,
on.
I talked about he is alive and he killed someone. Now he's alive. We have a guy in front of us. He's alive. He's 85 years old. He's terminally ill. He's going to die in 3 weeks, and he just killed a young 15-year-old strong boy. What should we do with him? Is it fair we just put him to death? That's not fair punishment. You know what? Yeah, we just put him to death because that's the penalty. By the way, taking someone's eye out, even if they're blind, is still going to be plenty painful. And again, you're also mentioning a very tiny minority of cases where a blind person took out the eye of a seeing person. And in that case, yes, all you can do is just take out his eye as well.
Which wouldn't affect anything, though.
Create
That's
equal
not
damage,
equal.
right?
It's not
equal
equal
wound.
punishment.
That's as equal as it's going to get
How?
because that's all you can do.
So
You
what if
deciding that you should pay money to make this more equal is your own opinion. The same way I said the terminally ill guy should also pay the family $10 million because how is this fair? It's not about fair or unfair. It's about this is the penalty. This is the punishment.
Yeah, but again, the problem is that punishment is not even really a punishment.
And $10,000 is fair?
It's $10,000 for the terminally ill guy you're talking about.
No, I'm saying like if I were to pay money for an eye, that's fair. Like I don't think
That's-
money is fair.
that
I don't
compensation
accept
is a lot
money.
better.
You knocked out my eye and I should take your money. Fuck your money. I don't want your money. What is your money gonna do for me? I'm blind. Like I'm
It-
saying, like all of this is pretending like you or the rabbis have the ability to estimate what the damage was through the eye and the loss of the eye. We're not following logic here. We're following biblical law. And the
well,
Bible
actually, let's get into
an eye
that
for an
because
eye.
you talked about this is about assuming that the rabbis have the authority. So let's look at first of all the authority in the written Torah. So we see, for example, in Deuteronomy 17:8-11, we see you shall do according to the verdict which they declare to you. You shall not turn aside to the right or the left.
Yeah, again, I don't know how many times I have to have this same conversation. It's like these out of context verses that people are using as sound bites. It's like look, read the entire paragraph. If you shall have a doubt in the existing law in your cities, you shall go up to the temple, go up to the place that God chooses, and inquire of the high court of priests and judges who are in the temple, and you shall do in accordance with what they say. Who is the high court in the temple right now? Who? Oh, no one, right?
No, we have judges though.
Are they the high court judges that qualify for that passage that you're mentioning to me? As if that applies to your local rabbi? That doesn't apply to your local rabbi. Look, Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 9. And you shall come to the priests, the Levites, and to the judge who shall be in that day. All right. Verse 8, you shall arise, go up to the place that God shall choose. All right. This is referring to a temple court of priests and judges that are in the place that God chooses. If we don't have a temple that God chooses, and by the way, you can actually see specifically, what does it say? It says in verse 10, you shall do in accordance with the matter that they tell you from that place. So it's actually explicit that the only court that has this level of authority, which we'll talk in a minute about what that authority even is, but the only court that has this great authority is the court that is giving a verdict from that place. So it's very specifically dependent on the priest, the judges being in that place.
No. It's where you dwell, the place where you live.
No.
It says that in the verse.
Okay, no, let's go back.
Let's read the verse. Go to 8. So let's go. If a case,
verse 8, if a matter shall be beyond you in judgment, between blood to blood, verdict to verdict, disease to disease, matters of dispute in your gates, then you shall arise and you shall go up to the place that Yahweh your God chooses. Okay, so that's the place. You shall go up to the place that God chooses. If you've read the Torah, you know the place that God chooses is the temple. You shall come to the priest, to the Levitical priest.
It will have chosen. It's a future tense.
Yes, because it was written before they enter the land of Israel. Okay, This is Deuteronomy written by Moses before they entered the land of Israel.
So is there a temple everywhere, first of all?
No. There's
So
only
then
a temple where God has chosen. So
so
in the desert, the temple was the tabernacle, and the tabernacle was brought to Shiloh, and then God allowed David and Solomon to build the temple in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount, which is currently occupied by a mosque. And there's no temple there, and there's no high court, and there's no God dwelling in there. Um, so let's continue. You should come to the Levitical priests and to the judges who will be in those days, and you shall inquire, and they will tell you the matter of judgment. And you shall do in accordance with the word that they tell you from that place which God chooses, right? So from that place which God chooses, and you shall observe to do as all that they instruct you. Okay? So what we're talking about is a very specific court system that exists in the place that God chooses, and you shall listen to what they tell you from the place that God chooses. This is not talking about your local Rebbe. It's not talking about the rabbis of the Mishnah or the Talmud. It's not talking about any of those guys. This is talking about a high court. Okay? Now, again, I want to just conclude, because this is not only is this brought to support rabbinical authority, which rabbinical authority has nothing to do with this court. Not only that, they also want to tell you that you should use this verse to listen to them even when they're wrong or even when they lie to you. So, for example, it says, do not go to the right or the left from what they say. Rashi and the Midrash comment on that verse, you shall not go to the right or the left, even if they tell you the right is the left and the left is the right. Okay, that's not what the Torah says. The Torah says don't go to the left or the right, meaning don't go one way or the other. But Rashi says even if they tell you that the left is the right and the right is the left, meaning even if they're trying to distort reality in your face and tell you the opposite is true, you should still listen to them. However, that's not what's being said here. You need to listen to them, considering that they're righteous judges and they're actually, blessed by God to be in His temple. And just to conclude, the man who shall act with malice, maliciously. Okay, I don't know what your translation says there. With negative intention to do the wrong thing. Okay, the man who shall act with the intention to do the wrong thing should be put to death. Right, and so the whole point is that only if someone opposes the court because out of the desire to do the wrong thing, say, I'm not listening to you, even though I know you're right, even though you've got the authority from God, I'm not going to listen to you, and that's an act of malice and rebellion. That's someone who gets put to death. However, what if I say, excuse me, great judges, look at this verse in the Torah that says the opposite of what you're saying, or can you please show me the source in the Torah where you got this from? Right? If that's where I'm coming from, that's not maliciousness. That's not rebellion. That's honesty. That's an attempt to actually hold the judges to account. And the Torah very much supports a system of accountability where all of the judges are accountable to God, where the king, for example, is accountable to God, right? And so this idea that there's just these courts and they have unquestionable authority, everyone has to listen to them, and of course that applies to all the rabbis who tell you what to do, it's complete nonsense, and it's an overreach of power beyond belief.
Well, here's why I think you need that court system, especially after the destruction of the temple, of why you need that. And is the reason because there are literally laws you cannot fulfill. Like if I ask you, right, how do you fulfill on the first of Tishrei, you'll emit blasts? How do you fulfill that right now?
There are multiple ways to emit blasts. Horns are usually the most common way. Any horn would suffice. I don't believe it needs to be a ram's horn. You can even yell. It's funny. There's a verse in Isaiah. It says, "Raise your voice, hariu kashofar kolecha." So to make a teruah, make a blast with your own voice. So you can yell, you can blow a horn, you can blow. It doesn't matter. Blow a
Well, how
horn.
many blasts do you
Ram's
have to
horn
do?
works. Doesn't say.
It
Doesn't matter.
doesn't say because it's vague.
Doesn't matter.
It
It
does
doesn't
matter.
say because it doesn't matter.
It
Who
does
told you
matter.
that it matters? Who told you that it has to be 100 exact blows? One is broken in 3, one is broken in 9. It has to be
Oral
3.5
Torah.
seconds. Oral bullshit. Okay.
Well, it's not oral
Excuse my
BS if it's
language,
if
because
it's meant to.
the Torah never says that. Right?
Why does God
You
say
just
to
follow
Abraham
the.
two Torahs?
It never says 2 Torahs.
Yeah,
It
it does.
says
It says
Torot. Torot doesn't mean 2.
no, Torotai,
Yeah,
two.
no,
Tor-
Torah time means my laws. Okay, you
No, it
don't
means
know Hebrew.
plural for Torah.
Sir, you don't know Hebrew.
Torotai
Pi does
means
not mean
plural.
2.
Yes, it does. It
Plural.
means
It's
plural for
plural.
Torah.
Yeah, plural. First of all, plural is not 2. Plural is 2 plus, right? 2
Yeah, so
ad infinitum.
Torotai.
Yeah, so my laws, right? If I say keep my mitzvotai, my commandments, chukotai, my decrees, vitorotai, and my laws. Torah means
Commandments, not
law. If you
laws.
read the Torah, again, I'm sorry, but these arguments are born out of ignorance. If you read the Torah, there are multiple Torot, there are multiple laws in the Torah. The Torah is the book of the law, and in the book of the law, there are laws,
But what
right?
does Torah mean? Hold on. You're saying
Torah
Torah
means
is
law.
law. It
Torah
means
means
lesson.
no, it's
Mean
Torah
law.
is law slash instruction. Okay. So if I say this is the book of the Torah, this is the book of the law, this is the book of the instructions. Within the book of instruction, there are instructions, plural, right?
Are
So then
commandments
there are
not instructions?
commandments. Yes, but there are different words. There are mitzvot, chukot, mishpatim, torot. It's just different ways to refer to the instructions and the ordinances and the commandments and the decrees that consist of this book consists of. And so that's all it means.
So let me ask you, do you dwell for 7 days in a sukkah?
Yes,
On
I do.
Sukkot?
Hmm.
So what is a sukkah? Just tell me without the oral Torah.
Sukkah is a hut, right? So what is a hut? Like a little temporary dwelling place, usually like kind of a shack made out of wood.
You dwell all 7 days there?
Yeah, dwelling doesn't mean you can't leave, but you have to dwell in it.
Well, how long do you have to stay in it? How tall does it have to be?
Doesn't matter. See, all
Well,
of these details, it only matters if you go open up the Mishnah and you read 90,000 different complications about if it's 2.5 walls, 3.25 walls, what if it's made out of this, what if it's made out of that. All of those details are made up details by the rabbis. They're claiming that these details are important when for you to fulfill the Torah's obligation, all you need to have is something that could reliably be described as a hut. If you were dwelling in a mansion for 7 days, we know that's not a hut. If you were dwelling in a igloo for 7 days, just what is a
what
hut?
defines a hut, though? What defines a hut?
A hut is very clearly defined. You can go look up Webster's dictionary. A hut is more of a permanent dwelling than a tent. A tent is usually made out of like, cloth or something. A hut has more of a permanent structure, usually made out of wood or something of the like. And it's a temporary dwelling that's not a secure structure, yet it is like a small little shack, house kind of thing, but it's just a hut.
So
And
why do we even do that?
because God said so.
Yeah,
God says,
but
I'm commanding you to dwell in huts because you dwelled in huts when I took you out of Egypt, and God wants us to remember the Exodus from Egypt and to
so
remember
so,
how our dwelling is reliant on Him.
so you don't think there's any type of dimensions that need to be resolved for the hut? What it has to look like? What should be on it?
No,
What?
none are specified in the Torah.
Well, when you say specify, here's the thing: is that they obviously had a way they did it at the times of the temple. They obviously had a way they did
People
it.
have been
That
building
way is
huts.
not given in the Torah.
People have been building huts for all of human history. All right. The word hut, sukkah, references having like there's some cover, some shelter. It's like a minimal shelter that you can have. It's not a house, it's not a tent, it's a hut. It's very clear. So, I really just this idea that even if the Jews did it a certain way, let's say the Jews used a citron fruit, etrog, right, as their beautiful fruit, as their splendorous fruit. You know what? That doesn't mean that you have to do the same thing that they did because that's not the obligation. The obligation is not keep my commandments as the Jews kept them 1,000 years ago. That's not what it says. It says keep these words that I tell you without adding or subtracting. So there are different ways to fulfill the obligation. If your tefillin were blue and round instead of black and square, you would still fulfill the obligation because the Torah never specifies what color or shape the boxes should be. It just tells you to have these words as a sign and an ornament. So this idea,
What are those words though?
the words that are written, these words,
What words?
these words, the words that are written, Hear, O Israel, God is one. The same way you write that in your mezuzah, you write it in your tefillin. These words, Hear, O Israel, God is one. Traditionally, and I actually agree with this tradition overall. They in the mezuzah they include the 2 paragraphs in the Torah that discuss mezuzah, the words on the doorpost, and then in the tefillin they include the 4 chapters that reference the sign upon your hand and the ornament and remembrance between your eyes. You have those words. That's all that matters. It's about the words. It's not about the shape. It's not about the box. It's not about the color. It's not about the size. That's all. By the way, they go into you need the parchment with lines. It needs to be written with a special ink and a special font and a special this and a special blessing, intention. No, no, no. All
So
of
you,
that is
you wear
made up.
tefillin? So you wear
Yeah, I
tefillin?
do. Mhm. Yeah.
So what does your tefillin look like?
Well, I
What?
just have the regular ones they make because I'm not a tefillin maker, and the ones they make work. Yet they would claim that if you made it, let's say, without four compartments or with a different color or a different shape, you wouldn't fulfill the obligation, even though the obligation has nothing to do with the shape and size and the color as the rabbis made it. No, it has to do with the words that are written in the Torah.
You put it between your eyes?
Yeah, yeah. But again, I think even if you put it here, it still counts as between your eyes, and there's a Torah proof for that. The Torah says you should not make a bald spot between your eyes, right? So technically, this area would still be considered between your eyes, but this is also between your eyes, right? So like, is it only this or is it this, right? It's this whole area. So the idea that if you put your tefillin here, literally between your eyes, you wouldn't fulfill the obligation is absurd. The Torah literally says put it between your eyes.
Well, I'm gonna get into more couple important things and some vague descriptions I wanted to talk about. So, like for example, you shall not do work on Shabbat, right?
Mhm.
So, what is work?
Yeah, I mean, what is water? What is
Well, it's not the same thing. I mean, like if I move a chair in my house, is
Mhm.
that working?
Is it? What are you moving it
No,
for?
so I'm asking you, is that work?
Are you remodeling? Are you rearranging your house, or are you just taking a chair so your dad could sit at the table?
Well, let's say I'm moving the chair, but
Is it
it's
heavy?
physically exhausted. Does that work?
It's physically exhausting. That sounds a lot like work, right? Labor would be another reliable translation for avodah, right? So if you're laboring, that's work. If you are engaging with the practices that you do all week to keep your work going, that's work. If you are invested in creating maybe like say a work of art or something of a significance that's work, then that's work. But if you're just living your life and you're going about your house and you're doing some things, I don't think that's work.
See, but like that's your interpretation. Like that's the problem. That vagueness.
What's your
It's,
interpretation?
well, it's not mine. It's the Oral Torah.
Okay, so according to the Oral Torah, can you open a bottle cap on Shabbat? Does that work?
You open a bottle cap on Shabbat.
Does that work?
I
Well,
mean, what do you?
it's a big debate between the great Rabbis because since they have so much clarity, they debate, can you open a bottle cap? Can you turn on a light switch? Can you play an instrument? They debate about all these things. And you know what? They don't come to conclusions about them. They just debate about them and they say, you know what? Better not to do anything. Just don't do anything.
Well,
Right?
hold on.
Is
Wait,
that a
why?
conclusion?
The question to be asking is why do they have the authority in what we believe in to even do that?
They don't.
That's what you should be
They have
asking.
the authority to have the conversation the same way we have the authority to have the conversation, but they do not have the authority to obligate people to listen to their conclusions, right? If
Why
I
are
say
Orthodox Jews the only ones who produce people who can perform miracles and great sages?
perform miracles,
Yeah.
who performs miracles?
For example, Lubavitcher Rebbe, over 100,000 documented miracles.
Yeah.
Um,
So
I,
are you familiar with the verse in the Torah that says if a man comes and performs miracles, yet he tells you to worship other gods and not and change the law, you shouldn't listen to him?
how does he change
Miracles
the law?
miracles are not the truth. Miracles are can be done. You saw Pharaoh's magicians could do miracles, right?
There's always
I
some
would first of all,
divine
I
thing.
would definitely argue that most of those stories are made up and propaganda. But even if there's some truth to these people's mystical magical abilities, you would have to then go to Hinduism and Buddhism and the Egyptian religions and all of the ancient people, along with modern stories of great Indian gurus who can do magic. And I mean, people's claim to do magic and miracles is never ending. I mean, by the way, you'd have to be a Jesus worshiper if you believe that miracles proved everything. Miracles do not define truth. God defines truth, and it's very explicitly said in Deuteronomy. God says, if you have a prophet who comes and offers you miracles as proof, yet he says to go worship other gods and to go change the law, you should not listen to him. So my argument is that these rabbis are actually telling you you should listen to our authority instead of God. You should listen to our conclusions about the law instead of the law itself. I see that as them saying worship other gods and change the law, right?
Nothing changed. Everything in the Gemara is using the written Torah to prove something. Now if we're going back to that claim that even let's say that they're doing these abilities to move you off the path or whatever you exactly believe in. Um, well, I would argue that the fact that they have these abilities using the Torah, and we even see it from a very young age, like for example, the Vilna Gaon being able to step up at the bima at 6, recite the whole Torah front and backwards at 6. The Arizal,
I'm sure that's what his followers say about him.
no, it's a known story.
It's a
Like
known story. I mean, do you believe every story?
Well, again, if you
Also
see,
say Jesus was born of a virgin. Is that
well,
true?
that's a complete mistranslation of the verse. If you look at well, it is, and there's no actual
No,
sufficient.
the first page of the New Testament.
Well, I'm talking about the Old Testament, where they get that
But I'm talking about the New Testament. I'm talking about the story of Jesus Christ. Maybe it's true.
that appeared 200 years after he died.
And how long the Vilna Gaon, didn't he die 200 years ago?
Yeah, but it was a contemporary story. Like just
Contemporary
like the
story. I
Rebbe here
mean,
are contemporary.
relatively contemporary. It's made up by it's been told by people who have a vested interest in proving the divinity of the Vilna Gaon. But again, I want to just read it to you. This is Deuteronomy chapter 13. The first verse in Deuteronomy chapter 13 is this entire word that I command you, you shall guard it, do not add or subtract to it. And then it continues, if a prophet or a dreamer of dreams arises in you and gives you a sign or a wonder, right? He performs a miracle, and the sign or the wonder come to pass. As he said to you, let's go worship other gods which you do not know. Do not
Did the
listen
Rebbe
to
say
that
that?
prophet. Do not listen to that prophet, for God is testing you to know, do you really love him or not? And then it concludes, after Yahweh your God you shall go, him you shall fear, his commandments you shall guard, and to his voice you shall listen, him you shall worship, and to him you shall cling. Okay? So, yes, when the rabbis say, take your Hanukkah candle and make a blessing, blessed are you, God, who commanded us to do this, when God never commanded us to do that. It's a rabbinic commandment. The rabbis are saying, we have the ability and the authority to argue with God, to make claims in his name. There's a whole story in the Gemara about rabbis who said, we are here to argue with God, even if a God calls out from heaven and tells us that we're wrong.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
the box
we get to
full. But
argue
you
with
don't
God.
understand what that means, though. It means that if a heavenly voice comes and says, "Follow this thing," but
No, you're right. But can I just tell you the conclusion of the story? You're right.
no,
By the way.
we
If it
follow
was if
the
it was just a heavenly voice, then I'd agree with you. But the conclusion of the story is that there was a rabbi who was walking in the forest or something, and Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, came to him, and the rabbi said, "Well, what happened in heaven when we had this debate?" And Eliyahu said, "Well, God was laughing, and he said, my children, they have beaten me." So in fact, according to the story, and I don't believe any of the story, I'm just saying from their perspective, it was actually God who told them the real law, but God was like, they beat me, like they have power over me, right? And
because
so
God gave the authority to the people. Now, again, if if
no,
if
not
we're, if
to
we're taking the Torah literally, right? Have you ever disrespected your parents?
probably yes,
Okay, so why can't I go right now in front of you right now and kill you?
because there's no death penalty for disrespecting your parents.
There is in the Torah.
The death penalty for cursing your parents or beating your parents.
Okay, so have you ever cursed at your parents?
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to enact just laws, and the Torah says you need two or three witnesses to establish a matter of death, and the Torah does not encourage renegade people going and just putting people to death on the basis of their own judgment. There has to be an actual uh, proper case where there's investigation, where there's witnesses, and yes, if you were to curse your parents, you can be put to death for that in a
Okay,
biblical
so
society.
if two of your friends witnessed you
You
curse,
can't just come and kill me because you think
so
so.
what if I found two of your friends who witnessed you curse your parents? I
Mhm.
took you to a court, can I now execute you?
Yeah, in a biblical
You agree
court.
with that? So you
Yeah.
deserve death right now.
Well, I never cursed or beat my parents.
You
Uh,
just said you cursed
I
at your
said
parents.
no. I said no. I said I may have dishonored them, but I have not cursed and beaten them, so I wouldn't be deserving of death. However, uh, that's the difference, right? The commandment is honor your father and mother. Then it also says a man who curses his father and mother or hits his father and mother is deserving of death. So those are two separate commandments. As far as, again, the situation we live in now, we don't live in a situation where there are any courts who have the ability to execute biblical law, considering the biblical law is at odds with American law. So, if we had a biblical court, we'd be in jail tomorrow. And so, again, similar to the temple, the law still stands. We just don't have the ability to carry it out.
So how is the law being commanded to be kept forever? As
Mhm.
stated in Psalms 105, verse 8 to 10, and Leviticus 18, it's commanded to be observed forever, literally forever, la'olam. How is that possible if you can't keep the law and observe the law?
Well, the commandment still stands. It's like saying, there's the covenant. God gave us a covenant for eternity, and then we broke it, right? But you know what? It still stands because it's eternal, right? And so even though the circumstances create an impossibility, the commandment is still there. So first of all, you need to internalize that as an understanding of reality, that this is how things should be. And then also we have to work to get to a point as a people where we can live in a land that's governed by the laws of God and not by the laws of man. See, I actually want to live in a land that's governed by the laws of the Torah.
But then it doesn't. Here's the problem with that. Like, let's say someone who is let's say let's give a really reality thing that's a real thing that happens in the world. Let's say someone who is has psychosis, who is mentally deranged, who has depression. All these factors play in to what he did. So if someone has psychosis or has a mental disability and curses his parents, curses at his parents, does not honor them, does all these things, should we now put him to death if he has a mental disability?
Well, you should be very careful not to fall into the traps of modern psychology that do everything in their power to excuse people from their actions by invoking mental illness and hormonal
That's a
imbalance
real thing.
or,
That's a
or,
real
or
thing.
whatever nonsense they believe. Now, is it possible that there are some people who are just so insane that they have no command over their actions? Yes. But again, you take that case to murder. Let's say someone is experiencing psychosis and goes and murders someone. I would
Yeah.
still say we should put him to death. Like again, the Torah's laws are quite clear. If it's a little child and like he didn't know at all what he was doing and pulled the trigger by mistake, whatever, that's a different story. But again, that's the job of courts, and God willing, we have just courts who can actually be honest in judgment and determine whether this person was acting out of knowledge or completely out of knowledge. But
Yeah, so
usually,
are you denying this?
99% of the time, if someone is murdering someone, they know what they're doing, even if they want to excuse themselves and they had a traumatic past and they had a traumatic childhood and blah, 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 they know what they're doing. So that,
Okay, well, it's not about that. Like if I have well, you first of all, you denying what psychosis is. Like, do you know what psychosis is?
I'm not denying that psychosis exists. I'm just pointing out that psychosis is used very often as an excuse to say that many, many people have psychosis and that there's uh, something out of their control in their medical hormonal imbalance that causes them to act evilly, right? Wickedly. So
That's
I don't,
real.
not as real as you believe. You're under the impression of the psychological institution that is in the process of diagnosing every single person and their mother and giving them pharmaceutical drugs to heal them. So I don't buy the modern psychology world and their opinions. However, I'm not denying that there are a minority. Again, it comes down to minority of cases of people who are just extremely out of their minds, that they have no idea what they're doing. And again, that would be the job of a court to determine just how psychotic or out of their mind this person is, or just maybe they actually knew what they were doing.
Well, let's say you knew that you were cursing, let's say your parent, but because of your chemical imbalance and your mental dysfunction that is going on in your brain, you're seeing images, you're seeing all these things that rise you up and cause a lot of issues that are real. That psychosis is very much real. You cannot deny that. Most psychoanalysts will say it's 100% real, and it's due to a chemical imbalance. So if that's taking place, and you're now taking the law to the literal sense, which is what you're doing, because you're reading it literally for everything. So if you're reading it literally, that would mean that if a kid who had a mental dysfunction, or let's say it was in a time of severe depression for a situation, if he cursed his parents, he would now be put to death. Do you think that's just?
So the Torah has an understanding of accidental murder and mistaken murder and things like that. And again, like I said, that would be the job of a just court to determine whether this person was acting out of knowledge and out of a place where they could have controlled themselves and they didn't, or whether they were truly out of their mind.
So where's the court right now?
Doesn't exist.
Is the
That's the
court
whole
going to
point. That's
return?
the whole point of this conversation. The court doesn't exist. The land doesn't exist. The temple doesn't exist. The only thing that exists are individual people who actually believe in this literature and want to follow it.
So if the laws are commanded to be kept forever, like observed forever, it says
Yep.
from now until the end of your generations, so
Hmm.
forever. Then if it's commanded to be kept forever, but you can't keep a bunch of these laws, how does that make any sense? See, that's my argument with Hosea 14. When you say Hosea 14 is changing the law, it's not. It's showing how you can observe the law forever in a time of exile. That it's not now where you cannot observe the law. You can still observe it through the structure of prayer, which is found in the Oral Torah. That structure is given.
It's just false to say that you can fulfill something that's not being fulfilled. All right. If the fulfillment of the sacrifices is bring a lamb, sacrifice it in the temple and sprinkle its blood on the altar, if that's what needs to be done and you're not doing that, you're not fulfilling that commandment. Period. You can do your best. I would agree with the sentiment of Hosea that you should do your best. Do your best when you cannot physically. You're tied up. It's like as if you were tied up with chains and there's nothing you can do about it. So what can you do? You can only do what's in your power. That's not doesn't mean the law is gone. By the way, eternity is not over. Were you aware of that? Existence is still going on. There is a redemption arc in Deuteronomy that is spoken of in the fifth book of the Torah when the Jewish people return to God, them and their children, with all of their heart and all of their soul. Then God will redeem us and bring us back to the land and make us great, and we'll be able to live in His glory and His law. But at the moment, we can only do what we can. But the attempt to pretend like these very bad alternatives are actually fulfillment of the law, that's just not true.
Well, they're not bad alternatives. It'd be like me saying this. Like, for example, slavery in the Bible, right?
Mhm.
When God allows slavery, do you
Yep.
believe that that still applies today?
Yes,
So you believe you can go out, get a non-Jewish slave, own him for life.
that's the law in the Torah. As
So
long as
you
you don't kidnap him, because what it says, if you kidnap a man and sell him, then you're deserving of death. So I don't think you can kidnap people and steal them. But if there's someone who, is a slave, and by the way, I don't think it's bad to get rid of slavery, but I also don't think that it's immoral to own a slave because God allows you to own a slave.
again, so you're kind of using a circular argument. Well, God allows it, so it's moral. But do you
Yeah,
think that
it's not
okay,
circular. God
well,
defines morality.
well, again, what do you well, let me ask you. So do you think slavery, the ownership of another human being, you
Mhm.
believe that that's morally right nowadays? Nowadays,
Yeah,
to own another human being.
because God said so.
Again, but I think most people would agree.
I don't follow morality based off of what I think. I follow morality based off of what God says. And the most reliable source of morality that we have is the Torah. And in the Torah, God does not condemn the act of owning another human being as being inherently immoral or not allowed. So I'm not here to apologize for God or for His morality. I'm here to follow His morality. There are many people who would say that it's disgusting to put adulterers to death or to put homosexuals to death. But you know what? That's the law in the Torah.
But again, then everyone would be put to death now. Everyone.
Yeah, well, that's why we would have to start a biblical state, and people have to enter that state knowing the law, knowing what the penalties are. And if you knew that if you engaged in a certain practice, this would be the penalty, you probably wouldn't do it.
Again, but this is the problem. Like, do you believe that the human condition is complex and perplexing?
Yes.
Okay, so if you agree with that, then somebody who murders someone with psychosis, like just a good example, the nuances of a human being are so extremely detailed that it necessitates a competent mental health diagnostic to ensure a clean separation between this and that. And rabbis had tremendous expertise in this, and this is evidenced by the laws in the Talmud, how they knew the human condition is so perplexing that all these circumstances take into account what is being ruled at. And if you don't take those into account, then you can't really have a functioning legal system. Because we would have that, by the way. All those criteria take place into what those laws are. An adulterer, right? You commit adultery. So if I commit adultery, right?
Hmm.
And I didn't know that I wasn't allowed to commit adultery, what do I do nowadays?
Well, how did you not know that? Like, where did you live? Under a rock?
No, not under rock. Let's say I grew up in a household where I didn't know the laws of
Again,
the Torah.
no one's going to do anything to you because you live in the U.S. There's no laws against moral.
Well, let's go by your logic, though. We set up a Jewish state that holds directly by biblical
Because
laws.
if we set up a Jewish state, everyone would have to know the law, as the Torah says, you shall know the law and teach it to your children. So every parent would teach their children, hey, son, hey, daughter, you better not do this because you know what's coming to you? A death penalty. If these were the laws, everyone would know them.
That's
Absolutely.
the future, though. Like I can make
Yes,
it,
it is. It is the future scenario because it's currently not the reality.
but
If
most,
you should
like for
still know these things, because you should know what the ideal morality is.
Well, for example, most Reformed Jews, and this is why majority of Jews do not know that if you have sex before marriage, you get cut off from the nation. They
That's
just don't
not,
know.
Torah doesn't say that. Where do you see that?
It does.
Holy
I'll put
shit.
these verse
What a
where you get
goddamn
cut
lie.
off. I'll put up for you right now.
Goddamn-
You get cut off from the nation. Exact verse.
That's an absurd lie.
It's not. I can show you where it says it.
Nowhere. Yeah, the Torah never says sex before marriage is forbidden. That's a false rabbinic and Christian guilt tactic. No, I'm a proponent of marriage, don't get me wrong. But the idea that you're not allowed to have sex before marriage is completely false.
I'll pull it up right now.
I mean, the only source that you can try to give me is that there should not be a promiscuous man or a promiscuous woman, yet it doesn't say that you're cut off from the people for being promiscuous even. Yeah, I mean, these are the issues here. Again, Judaism, according to the Torah, is a very liberating practice. According to the rabbis, is an extremely restrictive, actually terrible religion. And so there's a huge gap between what it would mean to follow biblical Judaism versus what it would be to follow rabbinical Judaism. But have you found the source?
I found so for example, Leviticus 20:18. Um, you're correct in the sense that it doesn't directly apply to sex before marriage, but many cases of sex before marriage
You're
can
talking about a menstruating woman?
in the menstrual period.
Yeah. Okay. So before marriage, women menstruate. And if you don't have sex with them while they're menstruating, then you're not cut off from the people.
So what if someone doesn't know this and does that?
Again, we would have to ask this, what is the scenario? Is the scenario was it done in mistakenly or was it done knowingly? Was it done in a world where these laws are well known and they're taught from the time you're a young child, or was it done in a secular world where you didn't know anything?
So, but now you're getting to specifics that
But I'm
require.
sorry, do you not see how misled you are? That you actually believe that being with a woman outside of marriage would make you guilty of sleeping with a menstruating woman? When all the Torah says about a menstruating woman is that she's impure for 7 days. That's it. So when a woman starts bleeding,
Many people would sleep with a woman in her menstrual cycle.
that's true, and that's a problem. But the whole point is that the Jewish people need to know these laws. The Jewish people do not follow God's laws. Again, the rabbis add an extra week to Nida and then say you have to go to the mikveh, which is completely false. And then they say it only applies to married women. That's why you're getting this idea that unmarried women are like always Nida. This is all rabbinic nonsense. Okay,
Well, it's not nonsense
it
because
absolutely is because it has no basis in the Torah.
well,
That's
if
what
we're applying this law, we're applying this law, and again, we also this is the problem is that we're taking everything broad. Well, this is this. Now, if we're doing that, there's like I'll just give you an example. Let's say there's adultery. How would you define adultery?
It's not about how I define it, it's about how the Torah defines it. The
So how
Torah
does the
says,
Torah
a
define
man
adultery?
who shall sleep with his fellow's wife.
All right, great.
Adultery
So
refers to sleeping with a married woman.
and why you think for a second, why would someone even sleep with a married woman in the first place?
Let's just take the obvious one, lust.
Okay, so lust is a good example. So let's say there's adultery for lust, but then let's say there's an adultery for escape. Let's say a woman commits adultery to escape her violent husband who drinks and abuses.
She needs to commit adultery to escape her violent husband. Which feminist propaganda book did you get that one from?
It's not
You
feminist
kidding me?
propaganda. It's that
Can you provide me one scenario on planet Earth that a woman needs to commit adultery in order to get away from her abusive husband?
again, life is gray. It's not
Oh,
black and white.
excuse me. You just said an absurd thing
How's that absurd?
that a woman needs to commit adultery in order to get away from her violent husband.
Let's say a woman commits.
In what world does that exist? Give me an
Okay,
example.
for example, number one, she's seeking, let's say, shelter, or she's seeking a place to stay and live away from her husband, and for that,
She needs
she
to fuck that man.
in the way that she wants an actual connection with the man rather than being abused.
Oh, she needs to fuck him, huh? What are you talking about?
Yeah,
I'm
first of all,
genuinely
why are
confused.
you getting slurs in this conversation? This is a
I
debate.
like to swear. I'm genuinely concerned where you get this idea from. See,
Again,
this is the question here, okay? A married woman is trying to get away from her abusive husband, and the way that she does that is by having sex with another man. That is a ridiculous concept. If she's really running for her life from her abusive husband, she should get the authorities involved. She should get law enforcement involved. She can rely on the protection of other men. She doesn't need to sleep with those men.
Again, you're thinking of the way it's need, but a lot of the times in these situations,
You're just
it
trying to excuse her sin.
it's not
An
excusing it.
emotional
It's that
excuse.
there's
She just
specific.
needed some human connection in her time of need.
Well, it's different. It's different how sins happen. There's an onus, an accidental sin. There's a purposeful sin. There's a sin where you were pshita, you were oblivious to what was going on. All these factors take play into the sin itself. To say the sin is universal throughout everything doesn't make any sense because it's not realistic.
I mean,
It's not a realistic thing.
if she was raped, the Torah talks about that. She was
That's
raped,
that's one
then
example.
that was in a field, so that's against her will. That's a different story. If she was in a field and no one could have saved her and she couldn't have called out, then she's not guilty. Okay, so that's an actual case where a woman is not guilty for adultery because she was raped, not because she felt she needed an emotional sexual connection.
Yeah, but
So
all
that's
these
bullshit.
things take into play. That's the
Oh,
thing.
no, not emotional mumbo jumbo does not come into play when we're talking about adultery. No, serious concerns like rape definitely do come into account, and the Torah discusses that. But the reality is that there is no excuse for committing adultery. And if this woman really needs to deal with her abusive husband, that's what law enforcement is for. And she'll ultimately get out of that marriage if it's really that bad. But for her to go commit adultery as a solution to her problems is a ridiculous idea, and she would deserve the death penalty for that.
We should kill her for that.
Yeah.
You see how absurd that is, though?
I see how absurd the Torah's laws are.
It's absurd when you
You
don't
might think they're absurd. I don't.
apply it to the human standard.
What is the human standard? She
How
committed
humans
adultery
function.
because she was emotionally stressed. You think that's a good
How
excuse?
humans function, how psychology works.
You actually think
Okay,
that
same
that's a
thing.
good
If
excuse?
if I curse my parents, just easy example, and all these factors took into play why that happened.
Which what you were upset?
No,
You
well,
felt
no.
some
Let's say depression. Let's say it was abuse.
depression.
Let's say it was all these things that took into practice. All these things that apply in that situation, and you ignore that and you say, "Well, you did it. We're putting you to death."
Look,
That's a
this
problem.
is why you need the Torah, because you need to understand that there are red lines that you cannot cross. You need to understand that this ridiculous idea that, oh, human beings, oh, poor little humans, were, Ted Bundy, oh, he just had childhood trauma, that's why he was a serial killer. No, I don't want to hear these sob stories. The reality is people know what they're doing. They know very well what they're doing. Evil is almost always conscious, and what these people are doing deserves the penalty. And if they knew that they would get this penalty, they wouldn't do it. That's the whole
Wait,
point of this penalty. What does the Torah say? Sorry, just to conclude. The Torah says you should put them to death and you should destroy evil from your midst. And everyone shall hear and they shall see and they shall not sin again. Okay, that is the purpose
Most
of this
Jews know
penalty.
off. You're making a statement that's just not true. Most Jews do not know. That's just a fact. They don't.
I'm
Most
not
of them
talking
grow up.
about the modern day. I already told
Well,
you
I
that.
am. Well, that's the problem because you're taking the Torah into that specific time when it's commanded to be kept forever. If that's the
Not that
case,
time, it's this time too, if we had the ability. And I think it's ridiculous, by the way, that the Jewish people have managed to take back the land of Israel, and the last thing they care about is implementing biblical law. I think that should be the first thing that the Jews care about. When they take back the land, the first thing they should do is establish courts to enforce biblical law. But the problem is that the Jewish people don't follow biblical law. Either they're secular and they follow secular law, or they're Orthodox and they follow rabbinic law. But what we really need to be doing is following biblical law, following God's law. And again, I'm saying yes, unfortunately, the time that we live in right now is a time where the Jewish people are completely ignorant as to what the laws of God are. However, if we lived in a state where someone, for example, did get put to death for something like this, then the Torah's statement would work. All the people shall hear and they shall see, and they shall not sin again. Right? That's
I
the whole
agree with
point.
you that we should establish a law more according to the Torah. But you also have to think about the state of reality at that time compared to now, in the sense that the reality of the openness of God's presence, was a lot more there than it is now. God's presence and the amount of miracles being produced that were open, that really just gave people a sense of God openly, was a lot more produced compared to nowadays.
How do you think we gain worthiness of God's miracles? Do you think it's by not listening to his decrees or by listening to his decrees?
Well, it's a time of exile right now. This is
Is
different.
there anything we can do about this exile?
Yes.
Deuteronomy chapter 30. If you and your children return to God with all of your heart and all of your soul, then he will return your exile and have mercy on you and bring you back to the land. So, yes, there is something we can do. And the fact that we have not been redeemed is a testament to our own misbehavior, not to God's lack of compassion, but to our own problems and our own inability to follow God because we're too absorbed with our own laws and with our own ideas and with our own decrees and with our own opinions about God's morality instead of just following him.
Well, I want to ask you, what's you talk about like also Orthodox controlling what goes on in the bedroom and all these factors. What do you
Mhm.
see as being unjust in the bedroom and all these different topics? Let's go through them.
We can just talk about the Nita thing. Well, first of all, there's two things that were brought up in this conversation. The idea that you're not allowed to have sex before marriage. And by the way, marriage is defined by a rabbinic approved marriage under a chuppah canopy with a ketubah document approved by Rabbis, right? That's what they mean by marriage. Actually, under the chuppah canopy, they say a blessing. They say, the one who's officiating the wedding says, "Blessed are you, God," of course, invoking the name of God in vain, saying, "Blessed are you, God, who prohibited the betrothed woman to us, but only allowed woman to be available to us through the process of chuppah and kedushin, which is the wedding canopy, and the kedushin, which is like the ring and all of the process that the rabbis go through. That's a
Yeah,
complete lie.
it's
The
holiness.
complete lie. I'm sorry, just let me conclude. It's a complete lie. The Torah never says that. The Torah does say that if a man seduces a virgin, he needs to marry her. So a woman only has a claim to a marriage if she's a virgin. If she's not even a virgin, then there's actually no need to marry a woman who you sleep with. In fact, the Torah has a situation of concubines. I don't know if you're familiar with that. There are wives and concubines. Concubines are women that you sleep with, have children with, and are not your wife. So the Torah clearly there's three standards. There's a concubine, there's a betrothed woman, and there's a married woman. But nowhere in that hierarchy does the Torah say you're not allowed to sleep with them. In fact, you're allowed to sleep with all of those different women because there are women that are available to you.
That's when you get married, though. It's like you marry
What?
them actually when you sleep with them.
No, that's not true.
Well, again,
Marriage is not, sex does not define marriage. Like I said, a concubine is a woman you have sex with who you're not married to. So clearly, sex doesn't dictate marriage. Marriage is a status given to a woman where you say, actually, you're my wife. You're the woman that lives in my home that I provide for. There's more commitment when it comes to marriage. However, marriage is a proclamation. Marriage, and again, you don't need to go through the rabbinic process in order to be married. If I
well,
just
you have to go back to what is the purpose of these laws in general,
It's
because
not about what the purpose is. They
well,
don't
it
exist.
is.
They don't exist. Even if I thought there was a very good reason to make people do something, I still don't have the authority to make them do that,
No,
right? You
let's
can
say
provide a
even
million rationalizations. It's
even
not
biblical
God's
laws,
law
even biblical laws. Why do we do that? Why do we not
because,
work on the Shabbat?
because
Why do we?
God
Okay,
said so.
okay, but that's the same argument. Well, God said so. Well, it says not a seven
God,
nishma. You will
why?
do and you
Yeah,
will understand,
exactly. So you do it. First do it.
and you will understand.
And you will hear. You'll understand the value of rest. You'll understand the value of union and communion with God. I think the Torah is
You're
very intuitive. I think the Torah is very intuitive once you actually accept it and do it. But the first things first, when God told Abraham to slaughter his son, Abraham went and did it. He didn't say, I wonder why God would ask me to do something so immoral. He
that was
just
pre-Torah number one, and
doesn't
number
matter.
two.
It's still very true to the nature of the connection between man and God. When God tells you to do something, you do it. That's the first thing you do. And then
Well,
you,
let's get into more specifics. Like for example, Leviticus 23:40, right? You shall take on the first day of the fruit of a beautiful tree,
Mhm,
okay, branches of palm trees, boughs of thick trees,
mhm,
um, fruit of a beautiful tree.
mhm.
So, what is a fruit of a beautiful tree? What exactly is a thick tree? And what do you do with these items?
You take them. So that's it. It doesn't say you have to shake it in this direction and that direction. That's made up. You take them to yourself, is what it says. So take it to yourself. There are different species. What constitutes a beautiful fruit? Well, some of that is objective, some of it is subjective, and the subjectivity is fine. So long as like if you have like an objectively ugly fruit, well, okay, that's not what we're talking about. If you have, and again, the word hadar doesn't just mean beautiful. Just translation wise, it means splendorous. So yafeh is like beautiful, but hadar is like there's a level of importance to it, if you will. So it can't just be like a standard fruit. It has to be something special, right? But it doesn't have to be a citron, etrog, lemon fruit. No, it could be something else. As far as thick trees, I mean, thick is thick, that seems like pretty self-evident. But yeah, that's the commandment.
Well,
Again,
it's big
you have to
on
fulfill by
two.
the letter of the law. No, because it's not specific. If you had one fruit and I had another fruit, that would be fine. We don't all have to have the same fruit. We don't all have to have the same thick branch. That's the whole point. This idea that everyone needs to be doing the same thing is the false idea that made the rabbis put everyone under this lock and key, that if you don't have the exact thing that we say you need to have, even though the Torah never says that, you're not fulfilling God's obligation. God never obligated you to use a citron.
No, that's why, again, no one who only follows the biblical Torah produces any abilities that really affect and change the world and add to Torah in any type of way. They just don't. Find me,
Where did you get that
find
one
me,
from?
find me people who follow the biblical Torah anyone who can perform miracles, who can reveal things in the Torah, hidden secrets that revolve around any of these things, and add books and shelves of knowledge. None of these things are produced by people
Yeah,
who follow.
adding books is not always a good thing. In fact, King Solomon says at the end of Ecclesiastes, he says, "Beware, my son, for books, many books weary the spirit." So, if we're all writing books all day, piling shelves of books like the rabbis did, that's not actually always a good thing. And as far as your question of like which biblical Jews, the truth is that there hasn't really been a significant
For a
group
reason.
of
It's a
biblical
broken
Jews.
system.
No, that's not the
A
reason.
broken system.
That's not the reason. Would you say that the reason why Noah was the only righteous person in the world is because he was broken?
No, no, no. So no, again,
Sometimes the
no.
minority is righteous.
So you think that you and among a very small minority out of all of the Jews who actually practically follow the Torah,
Yeah, I think that
you are
people
the
that walk
righteous
with
ones,
God,
and everyone else is not the righteous ones.
I think that righteousness is a gift that's given to everyone. The opportunity is given to everyone, but the definition of righteousness is walking with God, not walking with man. So yes, I think that the Jewish people who are not walking with God are not acting righteously.
And you're acting with God.
To the best of my ability, and I can probably do better. But at least in theory, yes, I am walking with God and I'm following His commandments, and that is by definition that's what righteousness is.
Okay, so which calendar do you follow, for example?
Personally, I follow the lunar calendar,
So the Jewish one or not?
the moon, the moon calendar. The Jews follow the calendar based off of the moon. I think that's um like, could I say that if you follow the solar calendar, you're wrong? No. Again, because the Torah never specifies which calendar you have to follow. The lunar calendar seems to be more ancient. The moon itself renews itself every month. So I don't know. I think it's reliable to use the lunar calendar. And
Oh, well, if you're not wrong for using the solar one, then for example, when it says in the first month on the 14th day of the month at twilight is the Lord's Passover,
yeah, you'd
right?
be counting it a bit different.
Yeah, so that'd be wrong then. It's the first month on the 14th day. What month is that?
Well, if you're counting according to the solar calendar, the first month would be April,
So
probably.
it's not the same month, it's subjective months now.
I mean, they usually line up to some degree, right? Isn't the whole reason why the lunar calendar has to have a leap month is because it needs to catch up with the solar calendar. So, in some sense, that actually implies there's a superiority to the solar calendar, because the lunar calendar lags behind. So, it would still be around the same time. It would still be in the spring. For example, the specification of Passover is in the springtime, right? The month of the spring. So, again, I personally follow the lunar calendar. I think that works. But if someone followed the solar calendar, that wouldn't be the biggest problem, not at all. And again,
It's specific though, like the verse, like in the first month on the 14th
yes,
day. So
but
it
what
it's
is the
around
first?
the same time the day is not on the right day, you're not going to get the right outcome.
Yeah, because but again, if you're following the, it would be an interesting question as to like, was the solar calendar even around in that time? Uh, I don't know. I have to do a little research on that, because like if the only calendar available was the lunar calendar, it would make sense that that's like the right one to go by. But again, it comes down to like you still have a valid calculation, right? So uh, if you're calculating through the solar months, the first month is still the first month in the spring. So I don't think you're actually, I think it would still work based off of the calculation you're using. It's like, even back in the day when they didn't have an established calendar, right? And they were like, oh, did the moon start here in Babylon? It's like, even if they were a day off, it doesn't matter because they're tracking a valid month. It's still valid. Their process is still valid. So I don't think that that's the biggest
Well,
problem
if it misses the date, how is it valid?
because it's still a correct date based off of um, a correct tracking of the dates.
The dates are subjective now. Like the date's different. Like so,
I
I
mean,
can use any
yes,
calendar.
because there are multiple ways to calculate dates. That's
But
just a
but so you believe that the Jews at that time had separate calendars.
Um, well, no, because they were all united as a people. But once they were spread out, yeah, they did have separate calendars, and then they actually have this whole documentation where they're trying to, align their calendar with Israel, so they do 2 days of holidays. Now, I think that's the problem. The problem is they were never supposed to change the holiday to 2 days. It's one day, and they should have just worked with the calculation they had in Babylon. They don't have to go to Israel to find out what day it is. They should look at the moon based off of where they are and make their own calculation. I think that as long as you're making an honest attempt to calculate the months, whether it's through the lunar calendar or through the solar calendar, you're still in line with the years or 12 months, and
Right. So
there's
now you're speaking for God. So it's not about
no,
fulfilling
I'm
the
not. God never specified which calendar you should use.
because it's in the Oral Torah.
No, it's
That's why
no,
it's not
no,
specified there. It's
no,
lacking
that's not
information.
the oral Torah. First of all, no, it's not. That's purely a traditional thing that the Jews traditionally used the lunar calendar. That's not law. Tradition is not law.
Let me
Tradition
ask you,
may
do you
be
believe the Oral
helpful, but it's
Torah
not law.
was before Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi or
Who?
not? Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi,
What about him?
the one who wrote down the Mishnah. Do you believe there was an oral system before that?
Definitely was not as practiced or put into to law until it was written down. I'm sure there were always, especially at that time, there was a lot of different groups of Judaism, and they were all in the process of an extremely heavy debate about Judaism and stuff like that. So it was around that time that Oral Torah really burst forward, and that's when the Pharisees started writing down all of their books. But again, I'm sure there were traditions and debates prior to that, sure.
So why would they make up all those laws suddenly? Why would they do that?
Why would a governing body of people make up many, many restrictive laws and try to hold people to them? Probably for power.
For power.
Mhm.
So they get power for someone observing the Shabbat.
No, they get power for someone observing the Shabbat the way they say to observe the Shabbat. They
How
get
is
power.
that getting power for them?
How is that getting power? I mean, what greater power is there than every time someone needs to know what to do, they come to you and they say, "Oh, great Rebbe, here is my wife's panties. Can you please inspect them for me? Oh, great Rebbe, what should I do on Shabbat? How many loaves of bread should I stuff down my throat on Shabbat? Oh, great Rebbe." There's a lot of power in that, absolutely.
Well, it's not, again, you're thinking of it as like a selfish way of rules to control people. But
Mhm.
I don't understand what the descriptions of these laws are and the reasons for keeping them and for the purpose of. They're not for restricting you and confining you. They're for revealing the hidden secrets in the Torah.
First of all,
This
they
is
are
why
absolutely restrictive. They absolutely confine you. And
how?
how? Because they add thousands of laws to the existing Torah. If you just
Oh,
follow
in
the
sex,
Torah,
let
you
me
would
ask,
only
what's
what?
more pure? What's more pure for someone?
What's
To have
more
sex?
pure, the word of God or the word of man? The word of God is more pure.
Well, actually, the viceroy, which we call, for example, in the Talmud, the Mishnah, as the one who's explaining what the king is saying, is who you go to understand what is going on. If you don't have the explanation, you end up not knowing things, just like you don't know what work is. What defines work? Like these are actual questions because there's a lot of things you can be doing in the house or where you're walking to, or if you're driving, or if you're texting someone and it's regarding something that's going to happen on the weekday that's referring to work. Does that count to work? Does lighting a fire count to work? All these things play into
Well,
part.
again, you just mentioned a bunch of different things. So, lighting a fire is explicitly prohibited. You shall not burn a fire on the Sabbath day. Um, as far as working, like texting related to work, then you're working, right? You're like, hey, go, let's close the deal. Let's do this. That's work, right? But if you're just texting your friend and being like, how's your day? That's not work, right? So you have to be honest about what work is. And again, your claim that the Oral Torah settles what work is not true. The Oral Torah is full and way more doubts as to what work is than what you would just derive from the text itself. If you just read the text itself, sure, you may have questions, but the Oral Torah leads you into a conversation about, again, whether you can rip toilet paper or not, whether you can carry your key in your pocket. You call that clarity?
Well,
And
the
also,
Arabic is described in the
how
Torah.
convenient for the Mishnah to proclaim itself the viceroy of God. That's ridiculous. That's their own proclamation. I am the viceroy of God.
That's
No, no,
not that. That's
no,
the
right?
people who
So,
had the people who were the greatest of that time. The
mm,
greatest sages of that time were the ones who wrote it down. I don't even understand that. It's not like normal people thinking it's like, oh, we just decided to write the Oral Torah. No, these are high level people who understood the Torah front to back,
I
like
mean,
front to back.
clearly,
They
that
all
doesn't
made it up.
matter at all. I don't care what their title was. I don't care. By the way, they were not considered.
Exactly.
There was so many groups of Jews at that time, and they were all fighting with them. So the idea that they were perfectly accepted as the authority of Judaism is not true. It was only later on in the diaspora that they really took control of the people. But the bottom line is no. Um, just because they're great rabbis doesn't make what they say true. What is true is what God said to Moses. That's written in the Torah. Everything else is in the name of the rabbi. And this rabbi said that, this rabbi said that. That's not the law of God. That's not what you're obligated to follow. If you want, you can read their conversations and agree or disagree with them. But the reality is that the conversation needs to continue, and the conversation needs to be had between parents and children and fellow Jews and non-Jews, frankly, up to this day. There's no reason for these conversations to stop. The Torah has already made it clear what the law is, and now we have to try to understand it and apply it to the best of our ability.
And like even like blatant contradictions in the biblical Torah.
Where are there there's no contradictions in
Like for example, God makes the heavens and the earth, and then towards the end it says, "As God made the earth and the heavens."
how
The
is that a
opposite,
contradiction?
because it's
The
saying
order, it's a contradiction.
yes, the first one is saying that God first made the heavens and then the earth. The second one is saying that God first made the earth and then the heavens. It's a
It's not
contradiction.
saying, no, it's actually not saying the order. It's just saying that he made the earth and the heavens. So that's technically true. If I say God made the table and the chair and the table, it's the same thing, right? He made both, right? Also, if you want to get into the nitty gritty, on the second day, God made the firmament of the heaven, right? And then he called the firmament heaven. So if you want, you can understand that verse as referring to the firmament, right? God made the earth and the heaven as in the firmament, so which is not like the broad heavens, because in the beginning God created the heavens, just you know, ad infinity. But then on the second day he created the heaven of the earth, which is the firmament, the sky. And so at the end of creation, if you want, this is interpretation, but it might answer your question. Um, it's saying God created the earth and the heaven, meaning the heaven to the earth. As it says on the second day, God called to the firmament heaven. If you want, you can take that answer. But regardless, it's not a contradiction. It's just switching the order. It's not telling you the order of events. It's just saying God created the
This
earth and the heaven. He created the heaven and the earth.
well, it's saying this first. It's saying this happened first and this happened. Then it's reversing and say now this happened first and that happened after.
I really don't see it that way. But again, if you wanted an answer to your question, I think I just provided you with a very good answer that in the order of events on earth, God first created the earth and then created the firmament on the second day, right? So that would be earth and then heaven. And he explicitly calls the firmament heaven. You can read,
I'll give another example. Like, do you believe the world is 6,000 years old?
I believe that the creation described in Genesis took place 6,000 years ago. I don't know
That took
what happened
6,000 years
before.
ago.
I don't know what happened before. As in, just to read the first verse, right? It says God created the heavens and the earth, right? And then it says, and then the earth. So it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, right? And then it says the earth was desolate, chaotic, and dark, and full of water, right? And then God created light. So you could, if you wanted to try to um, make sense of the scientific divide with the Torah, if science is, first of all, it's assuming that science is trustworthy and correct, which is a great assumption. But assuming
Not an
that
assumption. Science uses a practical
no,
and
still a claim. It's still ultimately a claim that they know how to date this Earth, and they know exactly what has been happening on Earth for the past 10 million years. That's an
fossils
absurd
that
claim.
predate 6,000 years old.
Yeah, in their opinion, right?
Not
I'm
in their
saying,
opinion. They
according to
evaluate
their
fossils.
according to their dating, like again, take the Torah, right? The Torah says Adam lived for 900 years. Okay. Do you think that the fossil of Adam looks the same as your fossil? If this man lived for 900 years, that's a different human being. That's a different material. Okay. So I don't believe that science has the ability using their own instruments that they've created with their own feeble minds and their own standards that they think they can trace what happened for the past 10 million years. I don't buy it. But even if you wanted to
That
believe,
way, that's how scientific progress even happens. Like they use scientific equations to make progress. Whether that is,
not unquestionable. It's ultimately based
so
off
what's
of
your argument to
their
that?
calculations. It's based off of their own calculations. But again, if even
Of
if you
course.
wanted to try to explain the Torah to accept that the earth is older than 6,000 years, the Torah makes it very clear that God created everything in the beginning, but then he can't then there was a point where the earth was desolate and chaotic, which by the way, science supports this idea that the earth found itself in a place of complete desolation, right? Are you familiar with that? Science claims that the earth has been through multiple destructions, right? So if God is finding the earth 6,000 years ago, now they probably won't agree with the 6,000 years, but again, that's already beyond their ability to trace.
Well,
Um,
it's not. It's not because we see, like, for example, scientific cosmic microwave background by measuring the distance of galaxies and these objects, we see the universe goes to 13.8 billion years. And we see an oral tradition, like, for example, of Isaac of Akko, who was a huge Kabbalist about 1,000 years ago. He predicted the age of the universe using the Talmud's way of prediction to go to, and he landed at exactly 13.8 billion years. This is 1,000 years ago. This is something that would not be known without the use of the oral tradition. We even see it with the use of cells. The Arizal 500 years ago talked about cells in the human body using also the Gemara. So these things aren't found by just looking biblically at the text.
yeah. So again, this has nothing to do with the law of God. I don't like. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an astrophysicist. We'd have to sit down and crunch numbers and actually see if these sources really align and if these
You can
people
search it up that way.
talking
About
about.
Isaac of Akko, date of the
Yeah,
universe.
I'm not saying it's not true. Okay. I'm just saying that ultimately I still don't believe science and I still don't believe Rav Isaac of Akko. So I don't actually believe that these people have the authoritative trust to know these things perfectly. It's ultimately a claim. At the end of the day, it's still a claim based off of a
That's
calculation.
backed up by
Whether
evidence.
it's some mystical calculation from 1,000 years ago or it's some modern calculation from a scientist's machine, I still think that it's not reliable as to what the real truth of reality is. Okay.
But so you think it's not reliable that
However,
dating the universe. You think that that's reliable? How they date the universe?
I do not think that the scientific uh, process is reliable to determine the age of the universe and the age of the earth and the process of evolution of
Do you
species.
know science? Do you know about the speed of light? Do you know about any of these things
I,
they use?
I know I know people, and I know that people do not have the capacity to track millions of years through studying a single bone from a cemetery somewhere. Okay, that's just the reality. They're pulling the wool over your eyes, claiming that they can track millions of years based off of a carbon dating. I think it's complete nonsense. However, I'm still willing to concede that it's possible that the Earth is older than 6,000 years, and this is what I'm trying to read to you in the beginning of Genesis, where Genesis talks about there being ultimately a beginning where God created the heavens and the earth. But then the earth was in a state of darkness and chaos and water, and God created light and life 6,000 years ago. So theoretically, the earth could be older than 6,000 years ago, have preceded this current creation. However, I do believe that God did create the earth in 6 days and that he did all of this with his word and everything came to be in 6 days, as it says in the Torah.
Well, like 6 literal days,
Yeah.
like literal,
Hmm.
that took place 6,000 years ago.
Hmm.
Do you believe in evolution?
Definitely not the idea that evolution has been happening without any divine hand, or that
Well,
it,
you're not
it
saying
took
that
this
version.
long, or that it takes millions of years for species to develop when God could create them in an instant with his word.
Yeah, he could, but we see, for example, other versions of sapiens with fossils that literally have a human skull that
Hmm.
are very, and this is like discovered. So to deny like evolutionary
And there's
process,
been a lot of weird beings on the earth, right? The Torah talks about like angel human crossovers, Nephilim, great reptiles. It's possible lots of things have gone extinct, and because they're made up of a different matter than the current one, scientists mistake them for being millions of years old. Again, all of this is ultimately unknown, and even the claim that we know these things are absurd. I think the earth is a very ancient, strange place. It could be that God created it anew 6,000 years ago. It could be that it's a very ancient piece of rock that's been the home of multiple creations for throughout all of time. I don't know, and neither do you, and neither does a scientist, and neither does a Kabbalist.
well, again, like a scientist does know because you're
No, he
trying to
doesn't. He
explain that
tells you that he knows. It doesn't mean that he
no,
knows.
they use a system of measuring that is very
That
precise.
they created.
Well, but we by evaluating things in the universe, it's not like they created it like oh we're gonna make up this value equals this value. Mathematics and science exists and they're used to predicting. So
Doesn't mean that
say
it's
that,
entirely accurate.
and what's your proof it's inaccurate?
I just think it's impossible to really calculate these things
If you think it's impossible, what's your like what credibility do you have to even say that?
because what are they calculating? They're calculating the unknown. They don't know what happened in the past. They don't know other forms of matter could exist that they can't even measure. They can't measure the spirit. They don't know what the soul is. They don't know what these things are.
Well, I
Scientific
agree with that. That's why I
scientific
agree with the
instruments
soul.
are limited. Scientific
They're
instruments
limited
are
to
limited
physical.
in their ability to calculate and their ability to identify things.
Well,
And the fact
science is calculating the physical distances and the
Yes, but isn't it curious that evolution leaves out the possibility of a creator doing all of these things? The
how does
whole
it pick it up?
because the entire theory of evolution is how could species evolve without any divine hand being involved, right? The only way is that it takes millions and millions of years for a fish to grow a tail, for a tail to grow a head, because there's
Not
no God,
without of a
because there's
divine
no
plan.
God. Yes, absolutely. The theory of evolution is trying to resolve how life got here to this point without a God saying, there shall be a fish. There
No,
shall
no, it's what is the origin of life? Like, do you know who created evolution? Do you know who like made the theory?
Darwin?
Yeah, Darwin. So Darwin's theory of evolution is just to discover the origin of
Yeah,
life. Not
but
like
it's leaving out the possibility that a God came and said, let there be light, let there be life, let there be fruits, let there be trees, let there be man, let there be fish. And it was. That's the biblical narrative. I trust the
that
biblical
mean
narrative.
though. What does let there be light mean?
God created light,
So there was no light before 6,000 years.
not on earth.
So the sun didn't exist
No,
more
the
than
sun
6,000
is
years.
not until the fourth day.
Again, but what you like literal day?
Yeah.
Like again, we can date the sun to like a sun's lifespan, and we actually see with other stars their lifespan to
You
be
can date
dating
the sun.
millions of years.
Okay. Again, assuming you
Millions,
can date the sun, it could be that the sun was existed before and God just put it to the earth. So actually, the word on the fourth day, it says that God made the sun, right? It doesn't say that he created it. So potentially it already existed and he just made it to be as the luminary for the earth. So he took an existing star, if you will, and made it as the center of our so our earth could uh, circle it, right? Again, these are just speculations to the extent that you want to try to, like again, the earth could have pre-existed this solar system, the sun could have pre-existed, and then God could have put them all together. At the same time,
here's the
again,
thing: the rabbinic
I don't.
way to evaluate it aligns it a lot and very close and kind of exact to science. That's the difference. In terms of speculating based off the biblical readings, the rabbinic way to do it literally gives you the perfect dates, like 1,000 years ago. Again, if it was true that the rabbinic way is BS, the interpretations are BS, you wouldn't get these entire calculations that are completely aligned with science, by the way. Like they do. Like,
Yeah,
how is it
again, so
possible
that,
that we
again,
know
it comes back to you thinking that there's such a great strength to be aligned with science. I don't actually buy
it
that.
is?
No, it's not. It's not. It
Like
all comes back
The Rambam once said, if someone thinks there's a contradiction between Torah and science, they either don't know enough Torah or don't know enough science.
yeah,
Because they shouldn't contradict, because it's about
science, if you're referring to just the reality of existence, yeah. But science, if you're referring to the human discovery of existence, that's a human-based ideology. I'm not interested in what people claim their conclusions about existence are. I'm interested in what God says. The Torah is providing for us statements that if you believe it, it's coming from God. And so that's actually what matters. And again, ultimately these things are unknown. We're talking about things that happened millions of years ago. No one really knows what happened. It's all speculation. It's all speculation. And what we have here is a revelation where God is saying, I came here and I created this earth. And what you're going to say, oh, because I dated the sun with my little machine, now I'm going to
A little
question this
machine.
stuff.
These are like complex things
Yeah, yeah,
that
you're really complex machine. It doesn't matter. The point is, we're looking at two fundamentally different views of reality. God has absolute ability to create in an instant with his word, or it takes millions and trillions of years for a fish to develop into a human being. Those are different views of reality.
no one says that, by the way, and it's a problem. This is a problem, by the way, with the whole
That's what evolution says.
whole
Evolution says that all matter started off as tiny cells and took millions and millions upon millions of years to evolve into complex life forms, the most complex life form being a human being.
you don't think God could have designed that?
I don't think that God needs millions and millions of years for that to happen, especially if the Torah says God created this all with his word immediately.
But what is it? You think God just spoke? Like what
Yeah.
does that even mean?
What does it mean that God spoke?
Like speech
Like
speech
me,
was
like what if I say, there shall be light and nothing happens because I'm not God? But if God says that, then there's light.
God has a mouth,
God speaks. Yeah, he has definitely has a mouth to
like a
the
physical
extent
mouth.
the mouth is the mechanism in which you project words. Yes, God has a mouth. Does his mouth look like my mouth? Probably not. You know, God tells us not to make images and forms about him. We don't know what God looks like, but God definitely has. The reason why we're in the image of God is because God has a mouth and he has words and he has a heart and he has emotions and he has sadness and he has rage and he has jealousy and all of these things he says about himself.
But you
So,
see, this is the problem with the biblical interpretation
oh,
of
what a big problem.
the problem is that it becomes like subjective. Like we'll interpret it this way, we'll interpret it that way, and then you get people because like, how would you define someone if we're going by the reality of nowadays? If I tomorrow become a biblical only Jew, so no oral Torah, then there are a lot of things I'm going to be really confused about, like a lot.
What?
What is work? I'm going to be very confused about.
Okay,
What
so just become an Orthodox Jew and put a fishing line around your neighborhood, and then you can push your baby in your stroller. It'll all make sense then.
No, well, the
Again,
Torah
what a
talks about an
dishonest.
Arab. The
No,
Torah
the
talks
Torah does not talk about an Eruv.
of making boundaries in your domain.
No, it does not talk about an Eruv. Nowhere in the entire Torah does it talk about making an Eruv.
Again, what? Okay, first of all, let's pull up some verses. Actually, I can show you this.
Yeah, again,
And you're thinking of the law devout of meaning. You're like, oh, let's just put up a line that like you're saying like, oh, we're just gonna do that for no reason.
yeah, it is
There's
no reason
reasons behind
because
it.
there's no prohibition in the Torah to carry something from one domain to the other, and there's also just logically, you cannot make something a domain by putting a fishing line around it, maybe by putting a wall around it. But even then, even if you put a wall around an entire city that's 20 miles long, you can't even leave your place. The Torah says you can't leave your place. So like, well, you're going to go on like a 20-mile hike because it's all in one wall. The point is, the idea that the oral Torah clarifies things is the lie. The oral Torah doesn't even know the difference between
Like
electricity and fire. How the Torah doesn't know the oral Torah doesn't know the difference between electricity and fire. It tells you that you can't rip toilet paper. It says that you can't carry your handkerchief in your pocket. That is not clarity. That's more confusion.
for example, we see carrying as a violation on
Where,
Shabbat with,
where
with Nehemiah 13:9 to 20, 19 to 22,
does he
when he
say?
says, "What is an evil thing that you are doing, profaning the Sabbath day?"
Hmm. And what were they doing?
This is referring to carrying. Here,
They're
let's
referring to carrying, really.
let's pull up
Or
the verse.
perhaps do you want to read it where it talks about carrying burdens and doing work and doing business in the gates of the city and carrying your wares and your merchandise and doing business in the city? That's what he was talking about. You want to read it? Where is it? Do
Pull up the exact thing.
you know where it is?
Yeah, in a second. I'll pull up on Safari.
Again, there's a similar verse in Jeremiah where he says, "Why are you carrying burdens into town?" Right? When you're carrying burdens, you're obviously working. When you're bringing your merchandise and doing business, you're obviously working. We know what work is. What are you doing all week when you're not at either you're at home and you're resting or you're working, right? And work is pretty clearly defined. We have to start off when you start off with the idea that work has zero definition whatsoever, that's where you end up in this space. Work obviously has a definition. I'm not saying there's no
But
gray area.
works need to be different things.
There is a gray area, but within that gray area, you need to be honest. You need to be honest with yourself and you need to be honest with God. And
So
again,
if I go out, for example, and part of what's peaceful and relaxing to me is, let's say, going outside and constructing certain things in my house, like moving certain things outside, maybe positioning certain things, changing the way they were placed, kind of like in a sense renovating my house. But it's a form of relaxation. Does that now work?
I mean, again, there's obviously a line to it, you know.
What's
There's
the
a
line?
again, there's a line where it transitions from being just casual reorganizing your room to being actually you renovating your house. Definitely when the work gets heavy, when it gets intensive, when you start actually, like building things and forming things and creating actually causing work to be done, that's one thing. But if you're just casually, enjoying yourself, that's something else.
Like
I
you can interpret it that way, but someone like someone else can interpret it a different way. Does that mean you guys are both right? It's like very
Well,
subjective.
I think that so long as you're not breaking an explicit biblical commandment, yes, we are both right, because the commandments only are binding to the point that they're explicit. Once you're in territory where there is room for doubt, then we can choose to behave differently. I can choose to not engage in those things, and you can choose to engage in those things.
You're
There is
saying when it's in doubt, you can hold a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, like
That's
when it
rabbinic
says
though.
have a
Idea.
splendorous fruit, it doesn't need to be that everyone has the same fruit. There is room for, or like a hut, it doesn't mean everyone's hut needs to look the same. There is room for expansion and variation in practice, so long as you're not violating the essential commandment.
But that's the thing. That's the thing. The oral tradition is giving what the Jews did, what they kept, how they
And what
kept
the
it.
Jews did, if you actually want to know what the Jews did, you can read the Old Testament and hear about how the Jews worshiped idols and committed murder and went against God. If you want to know
Talking
what the
about
Jews
laws.
actually did, if you want to read the book of Nehemiah, you can read about how the Jews didn't observe Sukkot since the times of Joshua. Does that mean we should do it because the Jews did it? Listen, not everything
No,
the Jews
like
did is right,
commandments,
all right? Not everything
like
the Jews did is right.
like
The Jews don't
commandments.
define the commandments. God defines the commandments.
Again, that's why it says that you will go to the judges at that time.
Yeah,
At that time
that
specifically.
time, the judges in the temple, right? As we read, the judges in the temple, and you shall listen to them from the place that God chooses. That
So
doesn't exist. That court doesn't exist.
so then how do we do it now?
You don't. You gotta practice in
That's
your life. Oh my God, I'm so sorry that reality is a
not
little.
reality.
Yeah, it is reality.
Can't fulfill the laws. Again,
Yeah,
like you're
exactly.
trying to say we can fulfill the laws, but you can't.
You
You
cannot
can't bring
fulfill all of
sacrifices.
them. You
Okay, do you
can't
bring
fulfill all of them.
sacrifices?
No, you can fulfill the laws that you can fulfill.
Okay,
That's the whole.
are you commanded to give sacrifices?
Absolutely.
So are you getting a sin now because you're not giving sacrifices?
That's God's judgment. I can
You
only.
don't know. That's the point, is you
Oh
don't
my God,
know.
I don't know what God thinks about me. Yeah,
Yeah, you
exactly.
don't know whether what you're
Yeah.
doing is a prohibition, like whether you're actually
No.
violating.
Well,
That's
I
a
do
problem.
know that I'm acting in accordance with the law and I'm doing my best to fulfill it. And in the case where I cannot physically fulfill it, then there's nothing that I can do. So I pray that God, in His mercy, forgives me for not being able to fulfill His commandments, even though I'm obligated to do them, but He knows that I can't. So I pray that He forgives me.
You pray that God forgives you,
Mhm.
and yet you're commanded to keep all the commandments.
Yeah, but God
But you can't keep
knows,
it. You pray
God
God
knows,
forgive you for keeping it.
God knows what your abilities are, and He knows that if you cannot physically fulfill His commandment, then there's nothing you can do about it.
So redemption is going to come when we negate the oral Torah.
That would be a big part of it. That's part of returning to God, is is going away from all of the institutions of man, all of the lies and the man-made corruption that exists, both in religion and out of religion, and return to God alone. That's
Again,
absolutely the process of redemption.
but again, this is why the movement is so small compared to other movements. Because that's why Orthodoxy produces leaders and people with abilities and that can do these things, is because they actually practice the oral law that has been kept before the Mishnah. I can give you proof. Like we even see in the Dead Sea Scrolls how it talks about machlokets in the Dead Sea Scrolls and about them disputing and making agreements to what
Didn't
the
I
law.
tell you that I'm obviously aware of the fact that there were disputes and traditions before then?
So when
However,
did it start up?
they were codified into law through the Mishnah and the Talmud, and later through Maimonides and the Shulchan Aruch and all of that. And what happened is that arguments between rabbis turned into gospel and religion that needs to be followed with the authority of God. That is an example of religious corruption. That's not an example of honesty. God wants us to return to Him. He wants us to follow His commandments. Do not respond to miracles. Do not respond to signs and wonders. Oh, so great. These people are so great. No, I don't think they're so great. I think that they've completely abused their power and they've done a disservice to the Jewish people.
How?
They claim to be the
How?
preservers of Judaism, yet I think they've destroyed Judaism
How?
by removing people from the Torah and claiming that they need to follow the rabbis and their infinite laws and their made up crap about everything that they write about in their 9,000 books about mysticism and law and all of the
And
things that
they're
they
made up
claim.
crap, and yet they produce miracles. Like
I already
you'll say,
told you,
okay,
most,
but you're gonna
most
say,
of the
okay,
miracle
God.
stories you made up and the ones that are true,
Oh, okay.
for sure. Come
Oh,
on.
I made that up. So okay, so let me get straight. So if there's hundreds of thousands of documented miracles from people who are atheists, like
Mhm.
people who are not even Jewish, like for example, the Doheny Eye Clinic, someone's getting evaluated at Doheny Eye Clinic for a rod going into their eye, and the eye turns back completely disconnects from the retina. And this is at the Doheny Eye Clinic where the evaluator, the top surgeon, says, there's nothing we can do to fix you. We can send you to a foreign doctor. And they send him to a foreign doctor, and the doctor gives him special glasses that can reflect the light a certain way. And he goes to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe tells him it's the way you should be drinking wine on Shabbat, which is red wine, according to Kabbalah mysticism, right? And he does this, and the Rebbe says, do it for 2 weeks, and you'll be healed. Does it for 2 weeks, and his eye completely flips back, and the retina attaches again. And then he goes back to the Doheny Eye Clinic for them to evaluate it. So the Doheny Eye Clinic put out a report about what actually happened, that it was literally impossible. And the doctor said, who do you know? And he said, the Rebbe. You don't see this with people who follow the biblical Torah only. They don't exist. And there's a reason, because they're not following the system correctly. How can it be that these major leaders throughout centuries and centuries and centuries produce these things and can do these things? The Rebbe, the Vilna Gaon, the Baba Sali, all of them.
I guess that Pharaoh's magicians were also following the Oral Torah.
That's not the
Is
same
how they
thing.
were able to turn their staff into a snake and turn water into blood. But the
That's not the same
reality
thing.
is that miracles do not determine truth, and mystical powers can very often actually be coming from a bad place. And God actually explicitly commands us not to engage in sorcery, not to engage in these practices. And He says, "Be wholesome with God and let your salvation come from God, not from man." So no, I don't believe that your ability to perform miracles means that you're right. I think that always, the standard is what does God say? What is the law in the Torah? And that's what we need to follow. You need to follow that through thick and thin. You need to follow that whether it's easy or hard. And the point is, though, that we have clarity on what the revelation is. And if we're going to sit here beating our chests, oh, we miracle workers, we're mystical geniuses, we have scientific calculations from the Talmud, I don't give a shit. I care about what does God say. I care about what is the law and what does it mean to find favor in the eyes of God.
You can't fulfill the law the right way. You can't. You can't give sacrifices. You
I
can't do
do
all
that.
the things. And
I
you
do
say,
that
oh
every day.
well, oh well. But Hosea tells you what to do. So if you're not going by what the prophets are saying and by the actual leaders that can do these things, you're rejecting the prophets.
So
That's
again, Hosea does not have the authority to change the law. If God says that the way to fulfill sacrifices is through a literal cow, and he says you can do it through your lips, which I don't think that's really what he's saying, but if that's what you think he's saying, then he has no authority to speak.
sacrifices of bullocks. That's what he says in the verse.
Yeah, I think again he's referring to metaphorically speaking, alternative ways to reach sacrifice to God. But again, there's a reason why you don't find me getting caught up in the Old Testament. I'm not interested in being caught up in every metaphorical prophecy of the prophets. No, that's not where my head is at. That the prophets, their entire goal was to warn the people to follow the Torah. That was really their job. If they're getting too far up in their rantings, that's not what they're supposed to be doing. Their job is to tell the people to return to God, to follow the Torah. And it always comes back to that. What does God say? Look in the Torah. What is the Torah? The 5 books of Moses. God spoke to Moses saying, that's where you're going to find the word of God. That's where you're going to find the commandments. For you to claim the Oral Torah clarifies things, it doesn't. It introduces external laws that are nowhere to be found in the Torah. It tells you need to go through 7 different loopholes and jump through a hula hoop to fulfill the obligation when the Torah never tells you to do that. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's telling you to follow an authority other than God and to go down a rabbit hole of observance that God never requires. And that, by definition, distances you from the commandments of God.
Well, that's why it's mentioned though. Torah tie is mentioned referring to 2 Torahs.
Hey, I already disproved that. You can't keep going back to that. Torah tai means my laws. There is the Torah of the Metzora, of the leper. There's the Torah of the red heifer. There's many Torahs, many laws in the Torah. Okay, that's basic Hebrew. These are like propaganda lies
Are commandments
from the
not
Rebbe.
laws?
There are different ways to refer to the ordinances. There's mishpatim, there's judgments, there's commandments, there's laws, there's decrees. It's like
Are
saying,
laws different than commandments?
yeah, in some sense, they differ.
Give me an example.
I mean, the distinction is not really that important because the Torah is telling you to observe everything as a whole. It's always said in a list. Fulfill my decrees, my judgments, my commandments, my laws. So you got to do all of it. All right. Now, sometimes something's referred to as a commandment, sometimes referred to as a decree. That's not your main concern. Your main concern is follow all of those laws, follow all of those decrees. That's what you need to be doing without adding or
You're
subtracting.
saying you have to do all of it, but you don't do all of it.
Yes,
That's
I
my
do.
problem.
I do everything that I can.
But you don't do everything that's commanded.
I do everything that I can.
Well, see, then my argument is that you can do more,
No, you
but you
can't.
don't.
Not based
That's
off
what
of the
it
Torah.
says.
Not based off of the Torah.
You're saying that the prohibition in Deuteronomy 4:2 is you shall not add nor subtract to the Torah. You're
Mhm.
not adding nor subtracting if you're giving a way to fulfill the commandment in a time of exile. That's not subtracting or adding.
Absolutely is. It's a
How's it
because
subtracting or
it's
adding?
simply not what the Torah says. Either you're actually doing both. It's literally both. You're adding a way to fulfill the commandment and you're subtracting what the Torah said to do. You're adding and subtracting at the same time.
And your basis is, well, we're obligated, and I don't know whether I'm getting a sin for not doing it or not. Like you're like vague, like you don't know because you
Yeah,
don't
because I
have.
don't know the mind of God, and neither do you. I don't know if God. See, here's the thing, right? Like God could say, "Look at you, Jews. Like the fact that you can't fulfill all of my obligations is your own problem. It's due to your sins. So maybe it will be held against us. But I
Did you
I
go to
know
yeshiva?
that God also judges people as individuals, and so I pray that He judges me as an individual. He sees that I was born into a time where we're not able to fulfill all of His obligations perfectly, and He can see that I'm doing my best to fulfill what I can. And I pray that I'll be able to come to a time and a place where I can fulfill all of His obligations.
And you're right, and all the leading rabbinic heads that have mass followers are all wrong. They're all wrong.
It's not me, it's God and His servant Moses are right, and all of the crafty conmen who try to usurp God's authority and the authority of His servant Moses, they are the Korach, they are the guy who's doing the wrong thing. They're the one who's coming to grab onto the name of God and His holy Torah and use it for their own ideas and their own agendas and their own positions that
It's
they take.
literally not specific enough. Like it's not like even when it says in Exodus, for example, Moses, I will make you a god over Pharaoh.
Hmm.
So is Moses now a god?
Well, it doesn't say I will make you a god. He said I'll make you like a god, right? In the sense that Moses is communicating God's word to Pharaoh. So he's saying, I'm going to make you like God to Pharaoh, and Aaron will be like your prophet because Aaron is speaking the words of God that is coming through Moses.
Yeah, but
The word like.
so let's pull up actually that verse.
Mhm.
We can read it.
Right? I mean, does that not make Moses like God if he's saying the word of God and then he has a prophet who's Aaron who's repeating the words that he's saying? So that would make him like God. He's not God, obviously. right?
Let's pull this up.
Also, like, what's your point? So Moses is a god, so what's your point? There's
No, I'm
many,
saying that is a problem, and that's why you need
not a
oral
problem,
interpretation to
actually. I
resolve
mean,
it.
again, Moses is clearly a man, he's not a god, so it's a ridiculous idea. But even if Moses was a god, there's many gods. He's not Yahweh, he's not the God of gods and the Lord of lords.
So you
So
believe there's a multitude of gods.
I don't believe that. The Torah says that.
So you agree there's multiple gods that exist, or that
Torah
exist.
says there are multiple gods, but Yahweh is the one God who's above all.
So you don't think that's meaning that the gods of humans made. You think you literally believe that there's multiple gods out there.
Yeah, I think there's both. I think there's gods that humans made. Probably most of the gods are made by humans, and then there are ultimately divine powers in existence, a multiplicity of divine powers. Elohim is a plural word, yet
No.
Elohim ultimately, in its perfect unity, is echad, is one,
The thing is,
and
so,
Yahweh,
so you
that's
think
Yahweh,
Elohim is first of all, you say Yahweh, right? Now,
Yehovah.
where do you get that pronunciation from?
Just the English. The Hebrew is usually Yehovah.
Like Yahweh,
Yeah,
and
it's
first of all,
English.
even vowels. Where do you even get your vowels from? There's no vowels in the Torah.
Logic, language.
Logic from vowels.
Yeah, language dictates, the Hebrew language dictates a certain pronunciation in order to, uh, this is just established as part of the language, right? So in order to determine whether it's past tense or future tense, you determine it based off of context and then you pronounce it differently based off of the context.
But where do you get that
Hebrew is
pronunciation?
always understood through the context. And then you know the pronunciation based off of the context.
Well, it obviously can't be Yahweh, first of
No,
all.
I told you Yahweh is the English pronunciation. The Hebrew would be Yahweh or Yehovah.
Like again, but the oral Torah gives us those vowels.
No. Hebrew is not the oral Torah. Hebrew is a language.
Okay, so
Hebrew is a
where in the
language
Torah do we
that's
see vowels?
very ancient. You don't, but vowels are the way in which Hebrew is read.
Also, there was an oral thing transmitted then.
It's not oral. It's
That
like,
is oral.
is language oral? How do you know that a camera is a camera? It's because
Come
of
on, come on.
oral Torah.
Did they
It's called
speak Hebrew?
language.
Did they speak Hebrew?
Did the Hebrews speak Hebrew? Good question. Yes, the Hebrews spoke
No,
Hebrew.
that's not what I'm saying. I mean, like, for example, after the temple, what was the normal dialect? Was a dialect now between after exile? Was the dialect now Hebrew or no?
No, but the Jews
It
maintained
wasn't.
Hebrew as a language.
So they maintained the pronunciation
Original
through oral
language.
transmission.
No,
Through oral,
literally, people that would be considered heretics by Judaism standard, maintain it. Hebrew is just a language. It's a language that has been maintained for thousands of years.
but again, we didn't see until recently Hebrew becoming a spoken language, really like a spoken between individuals until very recently.
Yeah,
That's
and
true.
modern Hebrew is like a far cry from biblical Hebrew, and it's still based off of biblical Hebrew, though, right?
Again,
So
but it's
all
based
of
off
Hebrew,
vowels that
all
we
of
get.
Hebrew, again, as if pronunciation really matters, right? If
Of course,
the
it
no, it
matters.
doesn't. If
Like,
I say Vayomer, right, and if you say Vayomer and I say Vayumer, does that really change the meaning of the word? No. Okay, this is just like it's called speech, right? Like accepted speech. Why do people in Britain say, water and people in America say water, or in New York they say water? It's just pronunciation. It doesn't matter. We're all talking about
the
the same
thing is,
word.
you don't understand the meaning of like if I were to ask you what are the meaning of these certain laws, you would just say, well, God commanded me them, so I should do them. But it says not
I
seven
know
ishma.
Hebrew.
But it says not seven ishma. You will okay, not seven ishma. You will do and you will listen. So and you will hear and you will and which really means you will understand. So how do you understand these laws? Why
By
do we do that?
you read them and you read that they are the revelation that God gave to the nation of Israel through his servant Moses, and that we're obligated to follow them, so you follow them.
Like you count the Omer, right?
Yes.
Okay. So why did they first of all, how do you count the Omer if it's incomplete? Number one, you can't give sacrifices. Is the first thing. Number two, why do we give the sacrifice of barley?
Okay, a couple things. You start counting from the beginning of the harvest. So the harvest is what determines the beginning of the count. And then you start counting on the day after the Sabbath, which is Sunday. In the time of the temple, you would bring an Omer offering, but obviously now we can't bring that. Um, as far as the barley offering, the Torah doesn't mention barley, it mentions wheat. And Exodus talks about the beginning of the wheat harvest. So it would seem that the Omer would be brought from wheat, considering that we're going based off of the wheat harvest.
I'm pretty sure it mentions barley. Let me actually look into this.
No, it definitely does not mention barley, and it mentions wheat. I can find you the source if you like. It's Exodus 34:22. Exodus 34:22. Right here. The holiday of the weeks you shall make for yourself at the first fruits of your wheat harvest.
And where's this exactly? Leviticus,
Exodus 34:22.
referring to the Omer.
Yeah, referring to Shavuot. So it talks about the holiday of the weeks. Exodus 34:22 talks about the holiday of the weeks and says it's from the first fruits of the wheat harvest.
So again,
So
that's to Shavuot though. Like where we see like the main source.
Shavuot is the Omer. The Omer
No,
is the offering that you bring before you count the weeks.
oh,
And
it's the end of
Shavuot,
the end of the Omer.
no, incorrect.
It's connecting Pesach to Shavuot.
No, actually, in the Torah, there's zero connection between Pesach and Shavuot. In fact, the Omer is brought at the beginning of the harvest, so you need to recheck your sources. This
Like for
is
example, like Leviticus 23:10-14.
yeah,
When you
Leviticus 23 says that you bring the Omer at the beginning the of the counting, right? So here,
as when you come into the land which I give
come
you
into the land and you
and reap
reap
its
its
harvest,
harvest, then
and you
you
shall
shall
bring
bring
the
an
Omer
Omer, the
before
beginning of your
God.
harvest, to the priest, and the priest shall wave the Omer before God as for your appeasement. On the day after the Sabbath, he shall wave it. And then you shall make on that day these offerings. And then, verse 15, you shall count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the Omer of the waving, 7 complete Sabbaths you shall count until the day after the 7th Sabbath. You shall count 50 days. And then on the 50th day is the holiday.
And it does not clarify, first of all, what grain. It doesn't say what grain.
It doesn't clarify what grain to bring the Omer with. That's correct. However, as I provided you the source in Exodus, we see that we're talking about the beginning of the wheat harvest. So
That's
um,
for Shavuot, though. You're trying to say the Omer is
this
Shavuot.
is my dear friend. This is the same one and the same thing. Shavuot is the counting of the weeks from the beginning of the wheat harvest. So if you're bringing an Omer offering, which is a meal offering, it would make sense that you bring it from wheat. Definitely doesn't say barley. So if you want to say what would make more sense, wheat would make more sense considering we're counting from the wheat harvest.
Again, but again, it
Definitely
doesn't.
doesn't say barley anywhere.
Yeah, but there's no specification though of what you bring. You're trying to say Shavuot is now the Omer, but there's counting to what? What are you counting to? What is the
You're
purpose of
counting from the beginning. The Omer is an offering, okay? Omer just means a measure of grain that you're bringing as an offering on the day after the Sabbath. And then you count from the day that you brought the Omer, 7 weeks, until the day after the seventh Sabbath, and then you celebrate the holiday of the harvest. So Shavuot is not the holiday of the giving of the Torah, as the rabbis lie. It is the holiday of the harvest. And you're counting that 7 weeks. Shavuot means weeks, 7 weeks after you bring the Omer, which is the measure of grain at the beginning of the wheat harvest.
So I'm seeing here, like for example, like if we go to Leviticus 23:10-16, and we see like verses 10 and 11, like when you come into the land and reap its harvest, then you shall bring the Omer of the first of your harvest to the priest. And
Yeah.
you shall wave the Omer before the Lord on the day of after the Sabbath.
Mhm.
And this is the offering now that's being talked about. And then if we go to 15-16, and you shall count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath,
From
from
the day that you brought the Omer,
the day you brought the Omer, 7 complete weeks, until
Sabbath.
the day after the seventh week, you shall count 50 days.
Mhm.
And then you shall bring a new grain offering to the Lord.
Mhm.
So first of all, what is that new grain?
It's a new grain offering, a new meal offering.
What grain?
Well, usually the meal offerings were brought with fine flour, wheat flour. That's the standard.
And like and another source that's connecting like also the I think like the start of the harvest to Shavuot is like you shall count 7 weeks for yourself. Begin to count from the time you start putting the sickle to the standing grain, and you
Exactly.
shall keep the feast
So
of weeks.
exactly. So
Feast of
Shavuot
weeks.
is always dependent on the beginning of the harvest. So the idea that it's connected to Passover is completely unfounded. Nowhere in the Torah does it connect Shavuot to Passover. In fact, Shavuot doesn't have a date. Why is Shavuot the only holiday that doesn't have a date? Well, because the harvest doesn't start on exactly the same day every year, right? Sometimes it'll start, sometimes it'll start now, and you have to go based off of the beginning of the harvest. So it doesn't actually have a beginning date or an end date. The date starts from the first Sunday after the harvest begins when you bring the Omer, and then you count till the seventh Sabbath. The day after the seventh Sabbath is the holiday of Shavuot, the festival of weeks, the celebration of the harvest.
But the counting of the Omer is before Shavuot, right?
The counting of the Omer, Shavuot means weeks, right? Shavuot is the holiday of the
A
weeks.
holiday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the holiday is at the end of the 7 weeks.
The end of the counting, right?
Yeah. Mhm. And the
Okay,
Omer is
so
the beginning. You
so the
bring the
reason why we make a connection is because of the parshiot and how, like, for example, in Parshat Emor is when we start to see the Omer appearing. And it's kind of connecting them to when they bring that offering to the giving of the Torah. It's connecting them. Because we see after the offering is given, Shavuot is when they receive the Torah.
Okay, this
So
is all of this is nonsensical. First of
huh,
all, Shavuot is first mentioned in Mishpatim, and then it's later mentioned in Kitisa. But also, literally, we're seeing here you don't even celebrate Shavuot until you come to the land and you actually have a harvest, right? That's what it says. When you come to the land and you reap its harvest, then you celebrate Shavuot, which actually implies they didn't celebrate Shavuot in the desert because they had no harvest. Not to mention, um, yeah, so nowhere does the Torah say that Shavuot is a celebration of the giving of the Torah. Nowhere does it say that it's connected to Passover. You want to say, oh, it's the same parsha, this, that. That's not a
they
command. This
count. They count. Well,
is
again,
not a
they
commandment.
counted the Omer and Emor. Talks about the Omer and Emor.
They counted the Omer and Emor.
That's when it's talking about the commandment of
Where
Emor.
do you see that? Where do you see that?
I'll pull up Parshat Emor right now.
Emor is the end of Leviticus.
Yeah, we see like 23. So Leviticus 23:15 and 16.
Yeah, this is not saying they counted it. It's actually like I told you, Leviticus 23 10 says, when you come to the land and you reap its harvest, then you shall bring the Omer and do this counting and celebrate this holiday. So no, they were not celebrating it in the desert. They had to wait till they had a harvest in order to celebrate it.
Again, that's if you're only implying that it's referring to the harvest, not
Yes.
and not any other connection between holidays.
No, there's zero evidence that Shavuot is connected to Passover. I mean, it comes after Passover, so chronologically, you have Passover as the first month, and then after Passover, some point between Passover and Yom HaZikaron, the Day of Remembrance with the blast, you have the celebration of the wheat harvest. So it would be like in the summertime, the summer wheat harvest, and then you have in the autumn and the fall time, you have the holiday of the gathering, right? So it's actually explicitly phrased in Exodus, the source that I gave you earlier, Exodus 34:22, it says you have the festival of weeks to celebrate the harvest, and then you have the festival of the gathering, which is Sukkot, which is before the winter time. You're gathering all of your crops in before you go out into the winter. So the Torah is actually agricultural. It's based off of the harvest, and all of that's very well established if you were to just read the text.
So so okay, I understand what you're saying. How when you come into the land and you will reap its harvest. Um, so the I'm trying to find this verse in context because there's multiple verses here, but but the counting of the Omer itself, like itself, continues even after exile. So in that sense, like you still count the Omer.
Yeah,
So
well, I can tell you what I do, because we don't have an Omer offering, right? But we still have a harvest. So what I did personally is I tried to find out when the harvest begins in my county here, Los Angeles. they told me this year is on June 1st. So June 1st happens to be a Sunday. I'm starting to count from the day after the Sabbath on Sunday. I count 7 complete weeks from the beginning of the harvest, 7 Sabbaths. On the day after the seventh Sabbath comes out to July 20th. That's when I'm going to celebrate Shavuot.
So even again, but you see how like you can still keep it in the sense that you can still observe the counting itself when the korbanot are not there. That's why there's a dispute, by the way, between the poskim of what is it referring to, because there's the obvious of what it's referring to, which is of the connecting the korbanot itself, and also, but then there's also the idea that we can still count when there's no korban. So the counting itself, what are we counting for? What are
We're
we
counting from the beginning of the harvest.
But why though? Like, what are we
Why are
counting
we
on?
celebrating the harvest? Maybe because the harvest is what gives you bounty and sustenance for the year.
But like, what are like? So, what's the purpose of doing it then? If there's no korban to be offered, what do we offer in that sense?
Because you're still celebrating the harvest.
What
Even
do
though
we
you,
offer?
what,
What are we giving to God?
we don't have an offering. The Orthodox don't bring an Omer either, as far as I'm aware, right? So there's no Omer offering. There's nothing you can do. Again, it comes back to that you're up against a brick wall. You can only do what you can. Same thing with Passover, right? We can't bring the Passover lamb, but we still celebrate the freedom from Egypt, right? So you do
So
what you
that's the problem I have though, because how are you commanded to keep it forever? According to these verses, you're commanded to like observe it forever and keep the laws forever, the
can.
Levitical law, if you can't keep it. How does that make any sense?
And you keep whining about the fact that reality doesn't allow for us to
Not
fulfill.
reality. It's what it says.
Yes, but it also says that you're going to be exiled due to your sins. And so if we ever want a chance to come back to the land and observe these commandments, we need to return to God.
So now we can't observe that percent.
You cannot. That's a fact.
So we can't. So what's the point of even doing the commandments then?
Well, we could observe some of them. In fact, I'd say probably even most of them, but we can't observe all of them.
So why would God command it to be kept forever if he knows we're going to be exiled? So if we're going to be exiled and we're going to be incapable,
Forever is not over. If we were to regain uh, control in Israel and we were to live according to the laws of the Torah, we would have to implement all of these laws because forever is still going on.
so we could bring the sacrifice out the temple.
No, the
So
Torah
how would
says
you do that?
you need to bring the sacrifices to the place that God chooses. That's why I don't bring sacrifices. Not to mention I don't have any sheep. But you know, you
So you
must.
construct a temple or no? Like would we
There is
construct
no
it?
temple. There is no temple.
So if we were living under your version that you would want, which is like, for example, a country ran by biblical
We'd have
laws,
to rebuild the temple.
then so we would rebuild it.
Yeah.
And you think
Course.
our
I'm not
and you think our rebuilding of
the
the
Jews,
temple.
the Orthodox Jews believe it's going to fall out of the sky like 3-year-olds. They have beliefs of a
Not exactly,
3-year-old.
but that's pretty
So
funny.
I mean, that's what Rashi says.
Again, it's a lot of it is also figurative and not like literal.
Great. Uh,
Um, just
well,
just like just like the days of creation, like you said.
I
Um,
said the days of creation, I believe, are literal. But yeah,
again, we can go back
I
to
did
that.
say I
The time
think
it makes no sense.
Hosea's statement is metaphorical. That's what I said. See, I do think in general, when you're dealing with post-Torah sources, it's best to treat them metaphorically, especially if they're either contradicting the Torah or they're a metaphor. But
Well, how
regardless,
could the
the,
prophet contradict it?
how could he? That's what I'm saying. The only way for him to not contradict the Torah is if he was speaking metaphorically,
But how is it contradictory if it's giving an alternative during exile?
because the
It's not
Torah never provides those alternatives.
because it's not talking about a time in exile. It's when they're going
Matter,
to
not
it's
the
it's
commandment.
it's when they're going to the land with the temple. So if that's when they're going to the land with the temple present. What do you do when the temple's not there? Your logic is just saying we'll
Nothing
just
you can
not
do.
do it.
They said there's nothing you can do.
But the law's commanded to be kept. So it's commanded, we're not keeping it, that's an issue.
You can do
But there is
other than do your best to return to the land and return to God and reinstate the practices that God wants you to live by.
so you think if we establish a temple and let's say we all keep the biblical laws that the Messiah is going to come.
I don't believe in the Messiah.
You don't believe in the Messiah.
No.
That's predicted by the prophets.
I mean, the prophets hardly predict the Messiah. Maybe they talk about like a great king or leader, but I don't believe that like we're all sitting here waiting for some Messiah to come. No, I think that's nonsense. I think it gets rid of personal responsibility and obligation. I think it opened the door for religions to be built around Messiah worship. I think ultimately, the Torah is about individual accountability to God and what your obligations are in your own personal life.
Well,
As
not Messiah worship, as you're trying to say, in the idea that if there's an exile, and we see with every exile, there's been a redemption. So now you're making the assumption that this one is not going to have a redemption,
I
that
don't
we're
think the
exiled forever.
redemption comes through a single Messiah. I think the redemption comes through, as Deuteronomy 30 says, between the return of the individual and the family unit to God. So
Yeah, I
that's
believe
a
obviously is
call to
not.
each and every person and their family, not to some, king Messiah guy who's the cause for all of your salvation.
Well, no,
Why?
I don't believe that we're waiting in the sense that we're waiting for the Messiah, therefore we should not do anything. I believe that by following the law and keeping the commandments, we
What
bring
is
in.
the Messiah going to do for you? I'm just curious. Like, are
Okay,
you just want a great leader? You just want
as
a good
stated,
leader?
as stated in the prophets, establish a third temple, bring all the Jews back to Israel, the complete resurrection of the
I is going
dead.
to do that because in Deuteronomy
Yeah.
30 it says God will.
Again, but that's in a
So
message.
I trust Deuteronomy and God versus the Old Testament and a man, right? So you see how there's like a divide in this theology, why I like to buy
Deuteronomy,
into the entire Old Testament. In the
Deuteronomy is
Torah it
pre-exile.
says, what?
Deuteronomy is pre-exile.
Exactly. It's pre-exile and it's foretelling a future exile where God tells Moses and the Jewish people, you're going to enter the land, but you're going to be exiled due to your sins. And when you're there, spread across the world and all four corners of the earth, if you return to me, you and your children, then I will return you to the land and gather you from all four corners of the earth. So that again is a relationship between God, the individual, and the family unit, not between the Messiah, not between
There's multiple references to the Messiah and the prophets. Like, you want me to show you or no?
well,
Or
look,
can you bring?
frankly, it doesn't matter to me because I don't follow the prophets, I follow the Torah.
So you don't believe the prophets have any authority at all or anything?
I don't believe they have the authority to fundamentally change the nature of Judaism, whereas in the Torah, the nature of Judaism is the relationship between the individual and God, and then they come and make it all about the Messiah. I don't buy that. If
They
that's
predict
really
it
what
or
they're
no?
doing, now again, I think we can sit here and make the argument, is that what they're doing? Is that not what they're doing? As far as I've read the verses of the Messiah, it's just talking about a very great king and a very great man. Potentially like Shiloh is mentioned in Genesis. This great tranquil one who creates obedience amongst all the people. If you
Also
want to know,
explains
if you
one
want to know,
will
sorry,
end
just to
all
say
death.
one more thing. If the Jewish people return to God, then God will establish a great anointed leader over them, right?
So when it
Like
explains
same way
one
as
that will,
Moses, right?
so it explains one that will end all death.
Yeah, again, I just think that that stuff is not helpful. I
So
don't
why
think
would again? Like, why would they say like? Do you not take the prophets? What they're saying is true.
no,
You believe
I don't think that
what they're
everything
saying
the
is true.
prophets I don't think that everything the prophets say are true. I don't think everything that's written in the books of the prophets are reliably sourced to those individuals. Lots of the prophets were written by other people later on. So things could have been added, they could have been changed. I
Well,
think the
why are
Torah
they
is
prophets?
reliable. I think the Torah is reliable. I think it's a cohesive narrative. I think it's always been the foundation of the Bible. When it comes to these lengthy, prophets and all of their writings and all of their visions, lots of it could be metaphor. Remember, there's a whole question of life and death in the Garden of Eden, eternal life. I don't think, though, that the Messiah is the reason for that. Like, if we were ever to achieve eternal life, it would not be because of the Messiah. It would be because God saw us to be worthy as people, as human beings,
The
not,
Messiah
not
comes to
because of the
redeem us,
Messiah.
but this Messiah comes to redeem us, and part of that is through our suffering. I mean, this is directly in the prophets.
I don't buy
Israel.
that idea. It's not a Torah idea.
You just throw out the prophets? Like, you don't believe in the prophets?
If they come to contradict the Torah and create a different form of worship that's centered around a single human savior, yeah, I throw that away.
Where do we worship a savior?
Ultimately, you believe that your redemption is centered around a single human savior. I believe that
No,
that's
it's a
idol
partnership.
worship. God is your savior, and you need to improve yourself in order to be saved.
Mashiach means the anointed one. It's
It's true.
God. It's God choosing the person to come on the planet to
What
help
is
redeem.
which people are anointed? Kings and priests. Okay, so if your idea of the Messiah is as simple as a great leader for the Jewish people or great leaders plural, I'm fully behind that. I believe that God sends leaders and prophets and priests and kings who are
Nowadays,
righteous,
no.
like King David, like
Nowadays,
Moses, right? King David is a Messiah, right? He's an anointed king of Israel.
What are some great Karaite leaders nowadays that we can follow?
You know, I think there are individuals who are rising to better represent God and his Torah. And I think it
Like,
is
what's a good example of a guy I could follow, like a Karaite leader who could really guide me to how to keep the Torah?
Look,
Like,
if your observance is based off of a leader, then you're already a loser. All right. You need to do the right thing as an
how does that
individual.
make me a loser?
Because if your entire life is looking for someone to follow as opposed to just following God, you're already not in the right place. Who was Noah's
No,
leader?
there's a reason why the Karaite movement is so small and barely anyone is part of it because it's not an effective movement. It doesn't.
So again, you're pointing to a fact. First of all, I believe the Karaite movement is saturated with corruption as well and their own bullshit practices and things. So I'm not a Karaite. I'm just a Jew who observes the laws of God, and the laws of God are found in the Torah.
You
And
don't observe all that.
in the real what?
You don't observe all that.
Well, I observe the ones that I can, and I aspire to observe all of them. And I believe that anytime that we see a deviance from the Torah, we see destruction. And if you're going to look for a group to follow, are you familiar with the verse in Exodus that says, do not follow the majority for evil? Do not follow the majority to pervert the law. The majority does not rule. The majority is not what makes things right. What makes things right are God. And if you have a true conviction and understanding of what God tells you based off of his revealed revelation to his servant Moses, then you can put yourself in the category of the select individuals like Abraham and Moses and Noah, who were all single people out of masses of unrighteous people, where God told Moses, I would destroy all of the Jewish people and make a nation out of you. Okay?
Was
That's how
Moses so
great
righteous?
Moses was.
Why did he talk back to God?
What? Why did he
Why did
why did
Moses
he
talk
try to
back?
defend the people
No,
and
no,
to
no. Why did
God?
he talk? Well, first of all, initially he didn't try to defend them. He said that they were not good enough to be redeemed.
And he
And
prayed that God should save them, right? And God
he said
actually
they're not
listened.
good enough to be redeemed. Is
When are you
that a righteous thing?
what are you talking about?
I'll give you the exact verse where Moses says to God that the people don't deserve to be redeemed.
Yeah, I mean, he was probably right. And they actually, first of all, I'm not familiar with that verse, but um, they actually later proved that that was the case by rebelling against God time and time again in the desert and worshiping idols and denying his ability to bring them into the promised land. Yet Moses laid down his life to lead those people and ultimately brought them to the land of Israel after years and years of rebellion and difficulty in the desert. So, if you're going to try to criticize Moses here, then,
He
clearly
also
you don't know what you're
doubts
doing.
God too. Like he for example when the people scorn him for which God told him this would happen, how the how Pharaoh's heart will be hardened. He goes back to God and complains to him.
Hmm.
Why would he do
I,
that?
I get it. Let's just understand, though, that Moses was the blessed servant of God who spoke face to face with God. Okay. So if you want to try to be better than Moses, all the power to you. But let's at least admit that Moses is one of the greatest, if not the greatest man who ever
No, I
lived.
can admit that, but why would he? Is that a righteous thing to do that or no?
Did Moses make mistakes? Yes. Clearly, he made a mistake so bad that God didn't even allow him to enter the promised land when he didn't follow God's words with exactitude.
So
However,
if Moses is such a great prophet, such a great person,
because we're not looking for perfection here. We're looking
why
for
would he hit the rock
minimum.
though?
We're looking for bare minimum courage in the face of evil to stand up to what is wrong, which is what Moses demonstrated as a young prince going to help an Israelite and killing the Egyptian who was beating the Israelite, who went and saved the girls who were being terrorized by the shepherds in Midian, who went and stood in front of Pharaoh and ultimately did take God's charge and mission and went and led those people with unbelievable commitment unseen before. He is the ultimate leader and man of God for all
If
of
he's
his.
such a great leader, why would he make such a foolish mistake of hitting the rock?
Yeah. Again, if you want to turn this into like
Foolish
a
mistake.
haha, like what's so good about Moses, you clearly don't know what you're talking about.
No,
And
that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying why
I'd
would
be
he
very
make that
happy to
mistake?
be with Moses, and then you can go be with the
No,
rabbis.
no,
Okay.
I'm saying why would he make that mistake? No, because like
Why would
these
he make that mistake? I don't know. Maybe because he was very angry, as you
it's a
can read the
foolish
text.
mistake.
Well, it's not
Wait,
that foolish. It's not
so the
that
great
foolish.
prophet is corrupted by anger? That's our prophet. That's our righteous prophet. He's corrupted by anger.
Okay.
He has no self-control.
It's you know you're not making any points here. You're just showing your ignorance by speaking
No, I'm not.
speaking
Because if
out
you know
against
oral,
Moses
if you know oral interpretation,
as a way to defend corrupt men who followed him.
no, if you know
Moses,
oral interpretation, you know that the reason why he hit the rock, why he did it, why it was actually a righteous deed. If you don't know that,
it
then
was
the whole
actually a righteous deed, even though God didn't let him go into the
yeah,
land.
yeah, because if you knew that if you knew that Moses' intention was to hit the rock, because if he had not hit the rock, he would have gone into Israel and he would
All
have
right.
established a messianic period before its time.
All right.
You
Stop,
knew
stop with
that
the
if
chatter.
so
Okay.
if you knew that, then you would know that what he did was
Yeah.
actually right.
If
But you
I
don't.
knew the made up
So
nonsense of the
yeah,
Rebbe,
that made nonsense
yeah, yeah.
when
Okay.
everybody who follows
Okay.
Judaism, when everybody who follows Rabbinic Judaism knows what to do, knows how to keep the law, and the leaders of Rabbinic Judaism have abilities that no Karaite has ever done on the entire planet. And there's a reason because it's a system that's faulty. And that's why no one in the Karaite system does anything. Like, doesn't do anything. No Karaite has ever established any leadership to people, has really done anything. That's why there's no Karaite movement anymore. If God wanted the movement to be established so bad, why is the oral movement like existing in a big stature? It's alive today. People follow it all the time. It shows you how to keep the law, how to follow God, how to reach prophecy, and the Karaites are doing nothing. They're not doing anything. You don't see them appearing anywhere. There's a reason why they're a tiny minority that doesn't contribute to basically anything. You can sit and go away to your corner and say, well, there's an oral Torah. Well, it's all wrong when we have the perfect transmission. It's mentioned in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's mentioned everywhere. It's needed to keep the Torah. You cannot keep the Malacha. You can't do any of them. It's not specific enough. And that's why in those extreme examples that we talked about, like, for example, mental dysfunctional things that happen all the time, in those cases, it's not described, which would mean I could literally go and kill you because you cursed your parents. If I had two witnesses, I can go and kill you. Does that make sense to you? That makes sense as being moral and just. That I
It
can go
makes
kill you.
absolute sense for me to be put to death for killing my parents according to the laws of the
No,
Torah.
for cursing your parents.
Yeah, for cursing my parents, it makes sense for me to put to death.
So if you
According
ever
to
curse
the
your
Torah's
parents,
law. According to the Torah's laws, it makes sense for me to be put to
wait, great.
death.
So let's go by the Torah. Have you ever cursed your parents?
The Torah's laws, and first of all, we already had this conversation where I told you I have not cursed them. However, according to the Torah, someone who curses their parents would be put to death.
So what
And
is cursing?
what does cursing mean?
Yeah.
Cursing them, you place
What
a
is
curse
cursing?
upon them.
Does cursing mean that I'm saying like a slur to my parents, or does it mean I'm
If
actually
you say
putting
like
them on
fuck
curse?
my parents, that's you curse them, right? If you say
Or wait.
well, let's start with the easiest one. My parents should be cursed, right? You just curse them. If you say slurs and things that would be considered swears and curses against them, yes, that's a curse.
So if I say swear to my parent, is that the same thing as now saying to my parent that I curse you that this shall happen to you? Is that the same that we equate those the same way?
It's equally, if I say the whole idea of like you say fuck someone, right? That means like they should be just be completely fucked, right? They should just be completely like gone. It's a curse. It's a abbreviated curse. That's why it's a word that holds that much anger, because it's a curse. So you can either give them a specific curse or you can give them like damn, my parents should be damned, right? That's also just a curse. It's a curse, right? But again, I digress.
So you've never done that to your
You talk about majorities, you talk about numbers. It's not about the numbers, it's about the truth. It's not about the miracles, it's about God. It's not about the mysticism, it's about God. The oral Torah does not clarify things. Just because
parents.
that things are written down by rabbis and you follow them doesn't mean that you have clarity. It just means that you believe in their authority, right? You
No,
understand?
it just
Like
predates the
if I say that the way
wait,
for
wait,
you to
no.
follow
We have
the Torah,
Kabbalistic sources that predate the rabbis. Like you know this. Like
therefore what?
they predate the rabbis. It was before the
For what?
Torah. We have Kabbalistic sources before the Torah.
Therefore what?
Therefore, we
We have
know they
Buddhism
existed.
before the Torah. We
Therefore,
have paganism before the Torah. What's your
no, it's
point?
not paganism if it's Abraham speaking.
Okay. I don't believe that these sources are reliable. The Torah is a reliable source. The Torah is the Torah of Moses. I don't believe every ancient document that's been written. I believe the Torah of Moses.
Again, so you're not following any historical evidence at all. So you deny historical evidence, you deny scientific discovery, you deny all these things and just say,
I
let's
place
keep,
the Torah of Moses above historical evidence and scientific
and
theory
it doesn't make any sense
and
then.
oral law.
The way you perceive it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't work as a system.
I mean, it
It just
absolutely works because I
so,
live by it every day and it
so if
works.
I so so if I argue from an atheistic standpoint to you, like
Mhm.
an atheistic standpoint, and I say 6 days of creation does not align with scientific discovery.
Yeah, and
You're
I say
gonna
that
be, well,
you
the
have
Bible
faith
says
in
that.
science, and I have faith in God and his servant Moses.
So what if I say to you, blind faith is foolish?
I say that blind faith in God is justified.
So you think that it's intellectually it's
Justified to
intellectual.
have blind faith in God, yes.
So you think it's intellectual to believe in something without any evidence? That's an intellectual thing.
I mean, I think there's evidence that the Torah is from God, but once the Torah is established as being from God, then you don't need your intellect and your capacity for reason goes out the window when you're engaged with God. As again, I gave you the example of Abraham willingly going to sacrifice his son. He was not acting based off of logic or reason or emotion or anything. He was just acting based off of obedience. So that's how I come
And it's
to
still pre-Torah. It's again, it's pre the commandment of you will do and you will understand. And there is no understanding of
That's not
anything.
a commandment. That's a response by the Jews saying we will do and we will hear. That's not a commandment. That's the Jewish people's response to God. And yes, the answer is if you, again, you're going to sit here and doubt Abraham's connection to God when Abraham
No, I'm
is,
showing you something that if
so
you read
it's
the
not
word,
pre-Torah. Abraham is pointing out what it means to be in a relationship with God. Abraham knows a lot more about what it means to be in a relationship with God than me or you. And Abraham is saying, when God tells you to do something, you do it. And that is how righteous men have acted for all of time. And so that's what we need to do as Jewish people is to submit to God and to stop trying to pretend like it's us and our ideas and our books and our laws that make this make sense. No,
oh,
it's
who's
God.
a great Karaite figure I can follow now?
I
That can
told
lead
you, stop looking for a leader, look for
because they
God.
don't exist. The system doesn't work.
So, so again,
The, the reason why
you can continue to mock and you can continue to scoff, or you can actually take God seriously and
I
take
do
him at
take
his
God
word.
seriously, actually
God never says, only listen to me if you have a nice leader to help you. First and foremost, you have to find God. Okay. You have
we're
to
guided by leaders, as stated in Deuteronomy. We're guided by leaders, and leaders do exist.
yes, but if there are no
The great
leaders,
sages who have these abilities, by the way, again, because you don't have those abilities. Like respectfully, when I'm looking at people who, like, again, you're right in the sense that, well, if someone's coming to tell me and he's performing these miracles and he's telling me do this, that's completely opposite to what's commanded, like work on the Shabbat, then that makes sense because that's completely deviating from the path. But if the only system that in Judaism that produces people that have these abilities, that can heal people, that can do all these amazing abilities because they use the oral Torah. The only system that can explain scientific discovery, the only system that can clarify the Torah is the oral Torah. I'm going to go with that as that was literal evidence of actual divine inspiration. So God, so let me get this straight. So God is going to put divine abilities to these people, and the system they're following is completely wrong, but He's going to give them divine abilities. He's just
goes
gonna give them divine ability.
to every pagan magician, to every Egyptian magician. Go read Deuteronomy as we read earlier. If he performs a miracle, you should not listen to him. This is what you're suggesting, or follow the majority. Like the Torah says, do not follow the majority. Do not be swayed by miracles. Do not just, no, no. This is wizardry and sorcery and fortune telling and all of these
It's
things.
not sorcery if they're using the
Absolutely
Torah.
is that you
It's
don't
not.
know what powers they're using. And again, the evidence is against them when due to their great powers that they claim to possess and that their followers claim to possess, even though you clearly don't have any of those powers, and no, only the great Rebbe has those powers,
No,
but
no, no. Hold on a second. I don't have those powers.
because you didn't learn enough Talmud, I know for
No,
sure.
no, not enough time. I can tell, by the way, that there's an emotional response to this. I'm gonna ask you, do you go to yeshiva? I think you went to yeshiva and
Yeah.
something happened where you had an emotional outcome to Rabbinic Judaism. So I want to ask what that is because I can feel there's an emotional response to this. That there's some type of thing that happened.
I think you're like a creative like psychologist. This is like
No, no,
hilarious.
I can tell that there's an emotional response to Rabbinic Judaism. And I agree, by the way, if you were in a system that did something very wrong, that can be an outcome that's not a good outcome.
Yeah. Again, the emotional response is being held captive by a corrupt system made by bullshit men who lord their power over other people with false authority. And so that's an emotional response. That's a logical response. I'm having a logical discussion here with you. I'm introducing emotion and anger as well, because I believe that human beings are creatures that are animated by more than one force, intellect and emotion being just a few of them. And so, yes, there's certainly emotional response that doesn't discount the logic that I'm telling you. The reality is, what you're saying is there are not majority groups of Karaites, or let's just say Torah followers. There are not majority groups. There are not people that can perform miracles. And the answer is that is not what determines truth. What determines truth is God and his word. And so even if you were all alone in the world, like Noah, even if you were the only person on earth who wasn't corrupted, you would still have to follow God, even if you
So
had a
you're
leader.
the only one who separates. So you're the one who separated from all the.
I'm responding to what you said, which is, if I don't have a leader, what should I do? And my answer is, you should learn from Noah, which is that even when the entire world was corrupted, he still walked with God and he still followed God. And if you say, but look at the majority is doing this, even though, by the way, the majority of Jews are not religious, in case you wanted to go with majority. But
No, they follow written only.
the majority of Jews are not religious.
They don't follow written only though.
Yeah,
And
they don't
like
follow
you
anything.
don't even
They,
follow
they
written
don't
only.
follow anything.
Like you
Yeah.
don't follow written only. You don't like if you followed written only, you would have to do things that you don't do. That means if you
You're going to continue to say that as an argument, which is obscene, because it's literally impossible. So it's not an argument. So you should just stop using that as an argument.
how
How is it impossible for me to bring a sacrifice in a temple that doesn't exist?
it's
It's impossible.
commanded again, it's commanded to be done forever.
Yet I can't
And
do
you
it.
can't and why and so what's
Physically can't do it.
so what do you do in exile? This is where we come in Rabbinic Judaism to give you what to
Oh,
do.
I'm so glad the
And
rabbis
Hosea
have
says it.
bullshit solutions to a problem. It's
It's
not
not BS.
solutions.
It's not BS if it's stated in the prophets. Everything the rabbis derive is stated
Oh my
in the
God.
text itself. In
No.
biblical Judaism. Look,
Again,
I can tell I can tell by the way that like if you're open to, I want you to share your experience with me about what happened. So I know something happened in Yeshiva or something, or someone said something, or you just realized something. But I think it's important because then I can understand where you're coming from.
I've shared my journey multiple times, and it's summed up as very simply. I was in yeshiva, a very successful Talmudic student, and I started to see the corruption in the rabbis, and seeing corruption in one rabbi led to seeing corruption in another one, until I realized that this entire system is based off of man-made institutions and man-made commandments. I was at the point of leaving Judaism entirely when I reread the Torah and realized that the revelation from God is in the 5 books of Moses, and all of these charlatans and liars and thieves who have gone ahead and used the words of God to manipulate people for thousands of years are the problem. There's a reason why Judaism is failing. There's a reason why the minority of Jews are even religious to begin with. And if we want to actually have a chance at returning to God as a nation and spreading awareness of what the commandments are, we need to be clear. What is the word of God? What are the commandments? What does God actually command us to do? And what the Orthodoxy is putting forward is a system of respect the rabbis because they said so. You'll never be as magical and as mysterious as them because you've never read all of their mystery books. And
We never said that, by the way. Like it's never stated
you
that.
did say that, and you said that they have
Where?
magical abilities and that they have.
Yeah, because they do the oral system, because they
Okay,
follow it the right
here's
way.
the thing. I don't give a damn about magical abilities. I care about God and his truth. And God and his truth has been revealed in the Torah. The Torah says very clearly, do not follow the majority for evil, to pervert the law. Do not listen to a prophet who does miracles, who then contradicts the Torah and talks about other gods.
What's
And
contradictory?
again, I'm not going to repeat myself. What's contradictory is that they are introducing thousands and thousands of laws upon the Torah that are not in there, thousands and thousands of ideas and religious ideas and mystical ideas that are not in the Torah, when the Torah explicitly says these are the commandments, do not add or subtract to them. So what I
Because
do
we
is,
have the oral tradition, like we have it historically before
yeah,
the Mishnah and
yeah,
before the Talmud. It's present there.
also have the pagan tradition and the Egyptian
Oh,
tradition.
it's a pagan tradition.
Yeah, it's pagan.
Let me get it straight. Let me get it straight. So when do we first of all see even these new forms of Judaism happen? The oldest form of Judaism we have is Orthodox Judaism. We do not see Reform appearing, Conservative appearing, and Karaite movement appear actually a lot after. The oral tradition
Yeah.
predates all of them for a reason.
Guess what predated that? The 5 books of Moses. So I follow the 5 books of Moses.
And you deny the prophets. It's funny about it. Like you
I
deny
deny the prophets to the extent that they contradict the 5 books of Moses.
you see how that doesn't make any sense?
Why doesn't it make sense?
Because you still can't tell me what contradicts.
Which prophet has the right to contradict what has already been said? That is the
What,
Torah's
what
position.
is
The Torah's position
contradicted?
is The Torah's position is do not add or subtract these commandments. Do not listen to a prophet who comes and speaks against the original revelation given in the 5 books of Moses.
But what is contradicted?
Well, you gave the example of the Messiah. The idea that all of Judaism is hinged upon the salvation of a single individual is not in the Torah. That's nowhere to be found.
It's not a single, it's
Nowhere to be
gone,
found.
it's gone. We have figures who are messianic figures. Like we have them, like Moses, like these people. So it's not like, it's not an uncommon thing. We have it in the Torah. These
Yes,
people come and they
but
redeem. So
Moses functions as a go-between God and the people. We don't worship Moses. We don't sit here and say, "Oh, I can't wait for Moses."
wait,
No.
where do we worship the Messiah? Anywhere.
Well, believing that a man is your savior and
I don't
constantly
believe
praying
that.
for him to come and constantly saying, "Oh, when the Messiah comes, things will be better." Oh, the
Who
Messiah,
sends the Messiah?
you literally have prayers every day.
Wait,
Please
who sends the
send,
Messiah?
send us the Messiah. Why do you
Shed.
need a Messiah? Why do you need a Messiah?
Why do you need Moses?
Because God appointed him.
Great. So why can't God appoint the Messiah as stated in the prophets?
Because that's not actually what it says in Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy, it says you and your
Again,
children should return to God, and God will return you to the land.
yeah, but the
So
prophets are prophesizing the future about what's going to happen, who God's going to send. That's the whole idea. Like
it's
again,
it's
like
not it's not the path towards redemption. The Torah presents a path towards redemption that's hinged on the individual and the family unit, and the prophets, according to you, um, create a path towards redemption that's hinged on a single Savior Messiah. And I think that that's a contradictory idea. Either it's a
it's
single
hinged
Savior
on
Messiah, or it's the family unit and the individual returning to God.
the
And
Messiah
God being the
is
Savior.
used to bring the people. It's to establish and bring the people back to the land, just like Moses was. God sent Moses to get the Jews and take them and redeem them from their exile. That's what happened. They were redeemed from their exile in Egypt, and God sent Moses to do that. So why would I now make the assumption that God is not going to send a leader to help redeem us?
Only because the salvation as described in Deuteronomy 30 is not meant, the Messiah is not mentioned.
Again,
You and your
you're
family are
negating
called
the pro-
upon to return to God.
you're negating the prophets that had the prophecy from God. Doesn't you see, that doesn't make any sense. So you're not only biblical.
Allegedly, there's a lot of prophets who claim to have prophecy from God who are not speaking in God's name. So the only way to know if they're speaking in God's name is to see if they align with the Torah.
Like, give me an example.
An example of a prophet who's
Oh,
spoken,
so how do you deem who's the prophet or not?
you hold them up to the standard of the Torah. Is what they're saying found in the Torah? Is what they're saying compatible with the Torah? You know?
So the Navi, you don't hold the Navi to be describing the prophets and what they did and the stories of David and all these people.
Well, I think a lot of the history is interesting and important. I think a lot of the prophecy is beautiful. But again, if you're going to sit here and hold me to account of these verses of like the Messiah is going to get rid of death and stuff like that, like no, thank you. I don't believe in that. Zero.
You just negate the prophets. It sounds to me you're cherry
I
picking.
think that they negate
Choosing what you want
I
to
think that
follow.
they negate Moses and they negate the original revelation. So it comes down to who are you going to follow? You can't follow both of them. Either you're following the original revelation, which presents one picture, or you're following a later revelation, which presents a different picture.
Or
So
there's a prophecy of a new covenant,
yeah,
which
again,
is described everywhere in
yeah,
Jeremiah, everywhere.
again, new covenants don't mean that the old covenant is gone. The
When
old,
did I say that? I agree with that. That's why I agree the law is eternal. So I don't disagree with that. The new covenant comes and negates the old.
but
When did I say
also I'm not such a fan of the new covenant idea either. Like in fact, if you read the Torah, it says in Leviticus that God will remember the original covenant. So it's actually the original covenant that we need to be returning to. I think
well,
the
I
original
believe the
covenant has
Torah, the
already
new
been
covenant,
established.
is an extension of the old. In the sense that it reveals more of the old, just like the covenant with Noah was still observed by Abraham, and the covenant of Abraham was
In
still observed.
general, you can have new covenants that don't negate the previous ones. But again, that's the whole point, is that if the new covenant means the covenant of the Savior Messiah, that's just, there's no source for that in the Torah.
Well,
So,
again, you're trying to say though that the
I mean,
prophets
Jeremiah's new covenant is far more poetic, where he says the new covenant is that the Spirit of God will be in everyone, and everyone, actually, exactly the opposite of what you're saying, not the Messiah. He says that everyone will have the knowledge of God, and it'll be a universal understanding, and no longer will one man have to say to his fellow, there is God, because everyone will have that awareness.
so
So,
and then the death will be destroyed, and the evil inclination will be destroyed by the Messiah, as
yeah,
stated.
that's not in that passage. Maybe it's in another passage. You have to remember a lot of these prophets are compiled later on, and they could be a mixture of different writings and different,
So
some are
why can I make
compiled
the
or
assumption that
not.
the Torah was compiled later on?
Because I think that the Torah has a far more reliable basis and it's far more cohesive. Again, like getting back to the as I commanded you 5 verses earlier, right? The Torah speaks to itself. It speaks into itself. It's a perfect unit of information with a wholesome reliability, and it's not that long either, right? And so
But again, like you're trying to
a lot of
cherry pick.
consistency.
I'm gonna deny the prophets.
Not
I'm
cherry picking because the Torah comes first. Even if everything after the Torah was wrong, the Torah is still true.
I agree, but it's prophesizing something in the future. And these are people that had revelation from God. You're trying
One
to
thing
say
I
that's corrupted.
One thing
So
I can tell you about the Torah says if a prophet gives a prophecy, how do you know if it's true? See if it comes true. So I guess we'll see. I guess we'll see. I'll just tell you that from the Torah's perspective, you are not obligated to believe in a Messiah, and you are not obligated to believe that a Messiah is your savior. In fact, you yourself should improve yourself and return to God, and that will be the source of your salvation. And God
I'm
will
gonna
say,
stay. I'm gonna stay with Orthodox Judaism for a reason. That there, and I'm just gonna say this. You can say like not to follow the majority, but Orthodox Judaism isn't even the majority of Jews. It's just the fact that it produces people with abilities that no other people have ever done it. There's no Karaite leaders. They just don't exist. The whole system fell
you'll
apart
follow the
because
multitudes, you'll follow the crowd,
not the
and you'll see where
multitudes,
that takes you.
the ones with the abilities that can actually reveal things. The Karaites don't show me anything.
It's
There's
all
no
been
revelation.
revealed. God, see, that's the whole point, is you don't believe that God's revelation is sufficient. You see God's revelation and you laugh on it, you spit on it. This is not understandable. What a joke. We don't know
Well,
it.
it is.
We that's the attitude. The attitude is you scoff at God, you scoff at Moses, and then you have the rabbis to come save the day. I don't live like that. I honor God, I honor his servants, and I honor his revelation, and that's sufficient to me. I don't need 6,000 other books to tell me what God says, because God speaks to all of us and tells us to read and understand his words and teach it to our children, that it's not in the heavens, it's not across the sea, it's in our mouth and in our heart. So it's close to us, it's accessible to us, and we're each and every individual is obligated to know this.
So
And
why is it righteous to not wear wool and linen?
to have a system that diverts power to the elites and is by definition corrupted. And I believe that if you were truly seeking God, you would just rely on His word, and you wouldn't rely on um, even your lying eyes that make you believe that the Orthodoxy has achieved great things, and all of their
Well, it's
achievements,
not
which
lying.
I personally don't
It's
believe are
documented.
great. I personally don't believe they're great achievements. But
I mean,
even if
it's just documented miracles. Like you can like deny them if you want to, but
you
you seem
continue to
to.
talk about the fact that miracles do not dictate truth, and that
So why? So why do they have miracles
in
then?
every single culture they have miracles documented from their
Not like
great
this.
shamans and gurus and
Not
leaders who
like
have
this.
done
Not like
miracles.
this.
No, not like this. Definitely not.
Yeah,
Again,
not 100,000.
ignorant. Yeah,
It's not ignorant if it's hundreds of thousands of documented miracles that have been proven and that are acknowledged by atheists, by a multitude of
I already
cultures.
told you that miracle stories are found from every single culture across the
Not
entire
like this.
world,
Not like
from every
this.
single religion, absolutely like this.
Show me one
The
modern
reality
day
is,
culture or belief system that has hundreds of thousands of documented miracles.
yeah,
One.
again,
From one
I will
from one
just
religion.
I will just go back to the Torah statement.
You can't show me
Miracles,
that.
I don't care. Miracles don't determine right and wrong. Miracles don't
I
determine truth and
agree.
falsehood. So
I agree,
I
but
all
miracles
of
do
the
show the
miracles, this guy can turn water into wine in front of my face, and he's not going to convince me, because I
they're
want to
not
know,
the same
what
thing.
does God say? I want to know, what does God say? And you know what? We actually already know what God says, because he's already told us and he's already revealed it to us. So this idea that you need to go into the constant depths of the Rebbe is incorrect. It's incorrect. We have the revelation. Do not add or subtract to it. That's how I live my life. And
Okay, so
I
why
pray
is
that more
mixing wool and
Jews
linen not
wake up
righteous?
to that. Hmm?
Why is mixing wool and linen not righteous?
Because God said so.
Do you see how it goes back to that circular argument though? That
Not a
God said so.
circular argument.
So God said so, God said
I
so.
don't know God's logic. You want me to speculate? Mixing certain fabrics is a aberration of nature. There's wool is an animal, and linen is a.
Like you're listening to the valid opinion.
I can do all of the mental gymnastics. You can make a logical argument. People argue from a health perspective, it's not healthy. I don't buy into that. I follow the Torah because these are God's laws. I follow these laws because God gave them to me. That's not circular logic. It's
It's
not
devout
circular
of meaning.
logic to believe in God and to
It's
believe
devout
in
of
what he
meaning.
tells. Hmm?
It's devout of meaning.
It's devoid of meaning.
Yeah.
According to you, I find obedience to God extremely meaningful. I don't actually believe that I can understand God's logic really. Like, do I understand why things happen or why God does the things he does? No, that's just the reality. We don't understand why reality is the way it is. For me to pretend to ascribe value to things and pretend to know the mind of God is just blasphemous, and it's ridiculous for me to even pretend.
It's not
But
blasphemy.
it
It
is because it's
describes
ridiculous for me to pretend that I know God's reasoning. I don't, and sometimes I don't even like it, but I still follow it because it's from God.
if the Torah talks about the judges at the time and the judges from where you live knowing these things, then then I can go to them to receive what is right and what is wrong and understand that.
Are is like nothing penetrating because we're full circle where we talked about those judges and we went through the source where the source explicitly speaks of judges giving rulings from the place that God chooses, which doesn't exist. All right.
From the
So
place of again, but you don't think God can choose? First of all, you think the knowledge now disappears though? So there's no temple, the knowledge is gone.
which knowledge? We have the Torah. We have the Torah. The
And there's
Torah.
a reason we had to go to those people to receive insight on what to do. Because
Yeah,
you it
there's a
doesn't
reason because if you're living in a land that's governed by these laws, sometimes you'll have doubts and you need to go and consult with people who are professional judges and
Great.
who
So
have
who do I go to? So who do I
but
go
that
to?
doesn't mean that their job is to create a whole new set of laws
No,
and
so
to
who do I go
lie
to?
about all of this about all of their ideas. That's not
Who
the
do I
job of a
go
judge.
to who do I go to when I have a doubt? Now,
You know, that's a difficult question. And I think that
there's no one to go to unless you actually observe Orthodox Judaism. There's literally no one to go to. There's no Karaite I can go to and say, please explain to me this passage and how to keep it. I have a doubt on this passage. What does this mean? They can't tell me anything.
again, you have to understand that God is forgiving and that God is loving and that God will actually provide you with inspiration
You're adding to this though.
if you
I feel like
truly seek. I'm not adding, this is in the Torah. It says you will find God if you seek him with all of your heart and all of your soul. So first and foremost, try to seek God and try to understand his will by yourself and pray to meet other people who can enlighten your path. And I myself, I have a knowledge of the Torah and I try to share that with people and clarify doubts if there are questions. If there's a lack of knowledge and understanding in the Torah, I understand that not everyone knows the Torah very well. So I'm here for that. There are people in the world who are good people who are trying to educate people on the Torah, but the Torah is ultimately there. It's not that long, it's not unreadable, it's five not so long books. You can read them and you yourself can become proficient in the law if you were actually reading the Torah to understand it as opposed to just take lines out of context to debate people. You would actually read the Torah and you would know it. You'd be more knowledgeable.
it's not
You would
lines
be
out of
more
context
knowledgeable in the
that
Torah than anyone else. So I
that it's
encourage you to read
extremely
it.
vague and you're trying to say it's subjective. It's like you're saying, well, because it's vague, therefore we can choose anything we want. No.
Yeah, to the extent that it's vague. To the extent that it's not vague, you can't, right? If the Torah is black and white about something, then it's black and white. But if the Torah leaves you a gray area, then that gray area exists, and
So
that's fine.
what defines though a sukkah, a temporary dwelling? You can just say, oh, it's a general thing. So
Yeah, it is.
so
It's the
temporary dwelling
generalized definition of a hut, and your hut will look different than my hut, and there's nothing wrong with that.
so a temporary dwelling. So what if my hut has all these nice things in it that make it not like that make it kind of look like a permanent dwelling, but it's my temporary dwelling.
Again, if your hut was a mansion or even a solid house, then you'd have a problem. If you had some accessories in your hut, that's not the problem. The point is the structure. The
What's wrong
structure
with it being a
needs to
mansion?
be hut-like. It needs to be booth-like, not house-like, not tent-like. It's a very specific definition. Hut-like,
Why can't it be a mansion if it's a temporary dwelling?
because the word sukkah doesn't mean temporary dwelling. It means hut.
Hut.
Yeah. So a
So
hut
when they had huts, they answer what is a hut?
A
And
hut is an easily constructed, not very like you got to go to Merriam-Webster's dictionary for this. Okay, it's an easily constructed, non solidified structure that you can live in, and it's like usually made out of wood. It's I mean like let's
I make a hut out of brick.
yeah, again maybe like out of soft brick, but the point is just not a house. Like there's a
Like
there's a gap.
what defines these things? That's the
There's a
problem.
gap between a house and a hut. And so you have to be able to use your better judgment as a human being who's been gifted the ability to think, who's been gifted the ability to observe the distinctions between houses and huts, and to then build yourself a hut that's clearly distinct from your house in
But
order
what's
to dwell in
considered
it
a
for
hut?
7 days.
How big does the hut have to be? How small does it have to be?
There is
What
no
are the
statement
dimensions
on
of
that.
it? What
There's
has
no
to be on
statement
it?
on that. There's no
There's no
statement
reason
on that.
because there needs to be an oral Torah to
No,
clarify.
there doesn't need to be a bunch of arbitrary requirements that the rabbis wrote down in the Mishnah
It's
of.
not the rabbi. These aren't regular people, by the way. You're trying to say that
Yeah, they
that
absolutely are regular people.
no,
Just
no,
because you found
they're
them
not regular
with
people.
glory doesn't mean they're not just people. They're just
That's why people in the Mishnah can resurrect people. There's a reason because of that.
according to who? According to them. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, according to the
Like, oh,
contemporary
we can
documentation.
resurrect people. Great.
Contemporary.
I believe you. I really believe them. No, I don't. I don't believe them. I don't believe their sources. I don't believe their stories. I don't believe their laws. I think they're charlatans. I think they're con men. I think they've completely destroyed Judaism. And I think that the fact that the Jews are so distant from God and they think that they need the rabbis to tell them a bunch of things that God never said to do is ridiculous. God has clarified the law for us, and all you have to do is follow what's written in the Torah, and you
It's
will
not
fulfill
clarified though.
the
You keep saying
obligation.
that, but for me, what I'm hearing for you is well, it's subjective. So the law's subjective. So for
I didn't
example,
say it's subjective. I said there are
don't
subject. I
take
said
us.
in reference to these details that are not in the law, those things are subjective, and there's nothing wrong with that because so long as you don't actually violate the law itself, then you're in the clear. So the law is objective, and
How
then the
do I know
details
if
are.
I'm violating work or not? The prohibition. How do I know?
How do you know? Look, you may never know for certain, and that's
That's the
actually,
issue. Why
yeah,
would God do
yeah.
that?
Well, you want certainty, right? And
No,
so,
why would God make a law that's vague so that I wouldn't know whether what I'm doing is right or wrong? So I could make a mistake. So God made the law, let's perspective. God made the law vague, where I wouldn't know what is work and not work, so that I could possibly violate the prohibition, even without knowing I violated it.
yeah, I can understand that that's upsetting. But the reality is that if you were to cease your activity on the seventh day and not travel, not do much, not engage in work related activities, have your food cooked on the sixth day, not burn a fire, you would be fulfilling the Sabbath.
Is
And
traveling work?
well, it says do not leave your place, right? So it says do not leave your place, have your food cooked on the sixth day, and do not burn a fire. Those are
So that
explicit
place, does it mean
commandments.
my house, or does it mean like my
Your place.
so
Your
my
place,
house?
but not your house. Doesn't say house, it says your place.
So
So
what's
you
the place?
stay close to your place.
So what does that mean though? How
Yeah,
far?
there's no specification on that.
And that's a
So
problem.
again, you're looking, no, no.
You
See,
can
'cause
violate it.
I
That's
don't
the
think
issue.
you understand how immature this is to look for false clarity in men. Okay, just because someone's offering you the false clarity, look at me. I have the answers for you. It doesn't mean that those answers are true. They're
No,
claiming that
we don't
those
believe
answers are
it's being
true.
made up by rabbis. We believe it's orally transmitted from Moses to the
Yeah,
people.
I'm sure you do, except there's no reliable source for that. And at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're relying on the words of man to dictate your life. And that is a hellish life to live. And remember, like I said, the rabbis do not have clarity on Shabbat because they claim that you can't turn on a light switch, even though electricity is not fire. And they claim that you can't rip toilet paper because that somehow work. And they claim that you can't push your baby in your stroller because that somehow work. So,
First
so,
of
so,
all,
so
that's
a
not true, by the
rabbi
way.
would put someone to
The solar
death.
thing is not true. Does electricity, by the way, emit heat?
Yes, sometimes. Does that make it fire?
Not sometimes, all the time.
Well, depends like how much electricity or how
And
much it is.
the spark of the electricity.
So sparks are electricity and heat is heat. So you don't know your basic table of elements. Electricity is not fire and heat is not fire. If I had hot solar power or hot nuclear power, that's still not power. Sorry, that's still not fire. So fire is a distinct element called fire. Electricity is not fire.
Well, again, the lighting the fire on Shabbat is so we go back to like the basic prohibition. You shall not kindle a fire
Burn.
in any dwellings, right?
Mhm.
So so the reason why rabbinics, by the way, define lighting for example, even turning on an electronic or switching on the light, why they define that as being lighting a fire is because it creates heat and sometimes light,
Is heat fire? Is
and
light fire?
it's a it's
No.
a it's a major part of fire.
You mean it's
Which
like
can lead
fire?
can
You
lead
mean
to
it's
cooking, by
like
the way.
fire? Because just because something is like fire, it doesn't mean it is fire, right? So that's like a basic logical distinction that we could make if we didn't have a vested interest in limiting people in accordance with the rabbinic practice of creating and taking the most extreme scenario and the most extreme restrictive opinion and the most stringent opinion and placing that on the entire people, which is
They
what the
both have,
rabbis
first of all,
and the
they both
Torah is
have
for.
combustion. They both have combustion, first of all. So they have that major element, and the
What
big
has
part
combustion? Cars have combustion, not electricity.
of it,
Electricity does not generate fire. Car, which is why you'd have a problem driving a car even if it was close distance. But electricity is powered entirely by electrical currents that are, even if they're hot, are not fire.
but
So
in gold itself, it glows red hot, which can lead to combustion.
you mean it can explode into fire?
No, it can
Only if
lead to
electricity explodes will you
it
get
can
fire.
lead to combustion. We have to
Not
get back
going
to
to, though.
of why are we not working on the Sabbath itself? What is work, and why are we not working? Like again,
We're
you
not
always have to
working
go back to why.
because God told us to rest and
Again,
not
but
to
you back to the
work.
same thing. It's like
Yeah, again, you clearly just don't have enough faith in God to follow his laws because he said so. Because that's the reason why we do these things. We do these things
that's a
because God said
foolish
so.
way. That's foolish.
That's foolish.
That's
Trusting God
blind
and
faith.
obeying God is foolish.
Right? That's
Blind
blind
faith in
faith.
God is foolish. So again, you don't know a thing about faith. You don't know a thing about God if
No,
that's what you think.
it leads to
You'd rather take your convenient explanations from your rabbi
no,
instead of
it's
believe in God.
foolish. It's like okay, so let's get a book that says that unicorns exist. Now, I'm not going to look at any evidence pointing to why we do this, to do they exist, historical evidence. I'm
Did
just going
that
to say,
book come from God?
what's your evidence the Torah came from God?
The evidence is the fact that the Torah, again, by the way, you're exposing yourself for not
No,
believing in the Torah. Okay.
no, I'm exposing yourself that you have no evidence. What's your evidence the Torah came from God?
So I thought you don't believe in things without evidence.
Yeah, exactly. So I believe in the Torah because we do have evidence.
Okay, so I believe in the Torah because we have evidence,
What's
but
that? What's
also,
that evidence?
well, the evidence is multifold. It's historical, it's spiritual, and it's personal. And so historically,
Personal evidence?
The Torah has been preserved as the foundation of the Bible. It's been accepted by the entire region as being the correct history of the Israelite nation.
Which tradition?
It was
Multiple
preserved
Torahs.
by the Israelites long before the Rebbe ever was born. Okay,
Now,
the
wait, which Torah
Israel,
though?
King
There's
David,
multiple Torahs.
Samuel, Samson, Joshua, right? People who came through Moses who wrote and completed the book of Deuteronomy to its completion, and then gave the Torah over to Joshua and said to read it in front of the people and created an entire nation based off of this history. That is the history of the Torah, and it's been preserved by Christians
There's
and
multiple
Jews.
Torahs though.
It's
Which
been
Torah?
no, there's not. It's
There is.
been
Which one?
preserved. What?
Which Torah?
The five books of Moses have been
Okay,
preserved.
which one though?
There's only one.
No,
There's only
there's the
maybe there's like
Masoretic, there's the Masorah, there's the Dead
maybe
Sea
there are
Scrolls.
very minor differences in all of these, but the reality is that both the Christians and the Jews have been preserving almost identical Torahs for 2,000 years, even though they were working against each other. The Dead Sea Scrolls take that even previously than 2,000 years. Plus, this has been the established narrative of the
A
Jewish
lot
people.
of Torahs have changed things in them. Like they
Yeah.
just do.
No, nothing to any form of making it not understandable or changing the fundamental narrative or the law.
Like for example, for like prophesizing and prophecies and all these things that
I'm
are
talking about the five books of Moses.
they're important. Again, like you're trying to negate them. So like if a Christian uses verses in the prophets, your argument to them is going to be that oh well none
I
of
don't care.
like I don't
Yeah.
believe any of the prophets existed. When we know that there were prophets after Moses. So when it says in Deuteronomy a leader will come after like you Moses, like Moses,
Yeah.
referring to Yehoshua the prophet. So we just deny Yehoshua existed.
I don't deny that they existed. I just say that they don't have the authority to negate what Moses said.
So Yehoshua, how does Yeshua negate what Moses said?
Didn't say he did. I like Yoshua. Okay. I'm just saying that if you find things in the book of Joshua or the books of the prophets that negate or contradict or bring to bear something different than the Torah's narrative, I think the Torah takes precedence in that scenario.
You're cherry picking.
Most of the Old Testament is compatible with the Torah. But if there are parts that are not, then you have to get rid of those parts in favor of the Torah.
You're cherry picking prophets then.
Yes, absolutely. You can cherry pick an entire library of books written over thousands of years that were written by multiple authors that are dense and could have been manipulated as well. So yeah, the Torah absolutely takes precedence by the very standard of this literature, which is the Torah takes precedence over everything that comes after it. Period. And so that's the narrative we have to follow. We have to prioritize the Torah. We have to prioritize those commandments. The only things you're obligated to follow are the things that are written explicitly in the Torah. And beyond that, we can have conversations and discussions about how to fulfill the obligations to the best of our ability. But ultimately, as I told you, we are landless, we are leaderless, we're even godless, unfortunately, as of today. So if you want to really connect to God and connect to his word, you have to take on that endeavor as an individual and understand that this is your obligation that's sent to you from God. And if you and your family return to God, you're looking at a path towards redemption. But other than that, there's no path towards redemption. Not following the crowd, not following the masses, not following the tradition, not following any of that. No, it's following.
Probably you're trying to ignore like these blatant problems
Not not
that we
ignoring it.
see in the Torah by saying we're just gonna be vague about everything. And that if God and that if this happens, we could be violating it, but we'll never know. So let's just have faith. That's kind of just foolish. Like that's foolish to say
Faith
that.
is foolish.
No, it's foolish to say, well, faith now negates the law. Like, okay, because I have faith, I'm not going to be punished for not observing the law. Does that make any sense to you? Okay, I have faith in God. Therefore, so God gave laws. Many of these laws are vague in description. And he gave them so we don't understand what they're saying, so that when we come to actually try to observe them, we don't know what this and this is. So we won't know if we're not
Well,
doing it.
we
Why
do
would
understand what they're saying, and all of these details that are not mentioned in the law don't matter. They're not relevant to the fulfillment of the commandment. As long as you fulfill the commandment itself, all of these details that you're bringing up that have only been introduced into your consciousness by the existence of the rabbinic writing, because there are so many writings claiming to have all of these necessary details that you need to include. Now you're suddenly like, well, how would I know all those things? It's like, no, you wouldn't know those things, and you don't need to know those things because they're not the law.
you do? Because you
You need
just
to know
told
the
me
law
leaving
itself.
leaving your place. What is that place?
You have to make an educated guess. The idea that you just
You
want to
want me
get
to
rid of,
guess when observing God's commandments?
yeah, I mean,
That's
you
like
want to get rid of
foolish.
all personal accountability.
No,
You
no,
want
I'm
someone to
not gonna.
come and tell you it's 400 steps, honey. All right, all right, all right.
Let's
401
guess.
steps.
Let's
No,
let's
the
let's
point is,
guess. Let's guess what's considered that. So I'm gonna guess today that it means my house. Tomorrow I'm gonna guess that it means my outside. So if I'm a Karaite, right? I ask you, and we're both Karaites, and I say to you, well, how
want to know
I
personally what I do? I'll take a walk around the block. I'll take a walk around my neighborhood, but I'm not going to get in the car. I'm not going to go drive somewhere. I'm not going to go on a jog. I'm not going to go on a run. I'm not going to take a hike. I'm not going to walk 10 miles. I think there are objective standards, and then there's a gray area. And within the gray area, you need to exercise caution and honesty.
but what if
And
my place is my city?
again, you'd have to make the case for that. You'd
Am I
have to make the
violating
case
it?
that you weren't, you know, taking a laborious hike across the city. How big is your city? Like the whole point is there needs to be
These are all questions that are answered in the oral Torah. Like
no,
you're
they're
asking
not. The
questions
oral Torah just provides an arbitrary line, 2,000 cubits.
through an argued
Arbitrary.
discussion. All right,
You have to understand that
through
it's very
pages and
nice.
pages of arguments, by the way. You're
Sounds
saying like
very nice to you to have a clear explanation, yet you also have to understand that they abuse that authority to then
how
obligate you to do another 10,000 things that the Torah never says, right?
how are you using it?
Like
Show me
street
one
decoration.
rabbinic leader. Show me one rabbinic leader that abuses the um the halachic rulings, like abuses them.
I already told you, all of their rulings are not from God. They
And
tell you
how does it benefit?
you're only allowed to eat food that has a rabbinic certification in it. You're only allowed to eat meat that was slaughtered by a rabbi. You have to add 7 days to after a woman stops bleeding to her period. We can go on and on. All of the laws that they said are made up. They're not in the Torah.
It's not again. It's not made up. If there is an oral tradition, if there is an oral tradition, it's not made
The
up.
oral tradition is made up. It's made up by men. By
It's made
people.
up, except all the Jews and 99% of the Jews that observe the Torah use the oral tradition. Because, like we said, it's too vague. You kept telling me, well, let's make an educated guess. So,
Mhm.
what is your educated guess? I'm gonna play the role now. I believe that leaving my place means leaving my city. I'm going to drive where I want in my city as long as I don't leave my place, which is my city. Is that okay?
Seems reasonable as long as you're using an electric car and assuming that your city is not like, gigantic. Like if you were going to take your car and your electric car and drive to the park, which is like down the block, I don't see that as a problem.
Do you do that or no?
Well, I don't have an electric car, but
If you did, would you?
also one thing to mention though is that the Torah does explicitly say you should sit down on your rear and not get and not leave your place. So, the Torah is being extremely exclusive, and this only applies to Shabbat, by the way. The holidays it doesn't say this, but regarding Shabbat, there's an extreme limitation on movement and activity. So you should take that very seriously.
So, but
And,
I thought
I pray that we enter a point where there is a land and there is a law and there is a court and there is a God that, or not a God, the God who is in communication with us and can help clarify some of these doubts for us. But the reality is that's not the situation we're in. So you need to take accountability as an individual and learn how to make decisions and learn how to take accountability for your actions. And if you're just going to wait for someone else to tell you what to do, then you're
I'm
just
not doing that.
be
I'm
stuck
not.
in a system of people telling you what to do. And
No,
that's how
I
it's
don't
supposed
see
to be.
you see it as that because of their perception of yeshivas and how you perceive it.
That's
I
just
don't
the
see it.
reality. The reality is that they're
No,
telling
it's not the reality. See, you see it as like as constricting you. I see it as giving you freedom. That if you observe the rabbinic laws, and you really do, that and you keep them, it actually makes your life a lot better. And we see this. If me myself, not having sex before marriage, makes my life a lot better. I'm just gonna put that out there. It does for a multitude of reasons. Saves time, saves trouble, makes sure the connection between me and my wife is spiritual and it's not wasted on sexual desire. All these, for example, 7 days of being separated from my wife.
No, the Torah says 7 days. The rabbis say 7 days after she stops bleeding, which is
And
almost
and
two
and,
weeks,
and why do I think that's a really great thing? Is
because the
that
rabbi said it.
no, not because I don't do your reasoning.
The
I don't do
Torah
your
says 7 days, and the rabbis say 12 days to
no,
14 days.
I don't do
Yeah.
your reasoning of because the rabbi said it. The reason why we do that is because we don't want
You can always provide false reasoning.
it's not false reasoning if you can't give me an alternative.
The alternative is listen to God.
And yet you can't describe certain things to me that are extremely vague. Like extremely vague.
I'm not a magician. I'm limited by the text the same way you are. At least I'm honest enough to admit where the text may leave us in doubt. But I think that if you
Why
do
would
your
God do that?
again, another question about why would God do something when I simply don't know the mind of God. But God is providing us with a lot more revelation than we would have had without the Torah. And we have lots of clarity from the what's written in the Torah, and we should act in accordance with that.
But again, look, I think we had a good
By the
discussion.
way, freedom comes from God, not from man. So you don't achieve freedom from listening to the decrees of man. You achieve freedom from listening to the decrees
I
of
mean,
God.
even though we're instructed to seek the judges at our time,
You're
you could say that, for
instructed to
example,
seek the judges if you have a doubt in the existing law of God,
and yet
not
there's
for
no
the
clear right
judges,
judge.
not for the judges to make up a plethora of laws that you need to follow based off of.
It's not making up; it's explaining them. By the way, so there again, I'll go back to the same premise. The reason why there's 39 malachot for Shabbat is because we don't know what work is. We literally don't. Like we literally don't know what work is. And God could have clarified that. There's a reason he didn't. It's the same reason why we clarify all these things of what does it mean the hut? What does it mean this? Those things are important for us to know how to keep the law and keep it to its completion. Because literally with your standpoint, by the way, there is no judge I can go to, a Karaite judge, that can tell me this is what it is. They don't exist. They just don't exist, and it's vague and hard to understand and hard to complete. So your idea is let's have blind faith and just say, let's make an educated guess and have faith God will be merciful on us. No, I'm going to follow the system that has been preserved for thousands of years that guides us to how to keep the law. That's just being logical. The Talmud, by the way, you make these claims, but the Talmud doesn't just say this is the law. It goes for pages and pages of using the Torah to prove that. Pages and pages and pages of arguments, of machlokets, of ways to prove why this is from this. They never make up something. They always take it from the text itself. That's an assumption.
Yeah, that's completely false. They absolutely make things up. and they go so far away from the text that it's completely unrecognizable that they ever got that from the original text. So please stop misrepresenting the
I'm
Talmud and
not.
romanticizing.
Open up any page in Talmud right now. Any
I
page.
have. Please stop romanticizing the Talmud as if it's a cohesive dialogue that stays honest to the text, because it
It
doesn't. It
is. All right,
makes
no,
things
we
up.
can we can.
It
I'll get
makes
a
things
Talmud.
up ad
No, what?
nauseum, makes things up unbelievably extensively. And so the reality is, again, the only thing you're obligated to follow is the law of God. And if you just want to conveniently enter yourself into a system that you think gets rid of all your doubts for you, um, good luck.
It's not think, it does, and it shows me how to follow the law. Just like you don't know what work is or what the place is. You just don't know. You can sit here and keep saying, well, you're following the law of the rabbis. When okay, we don't believe that, first of all. We believe it's been preserved and be transmitted and actually had a perfect transmission. But you still don't know these certain things. Like you don't know them. And your absence of knowing is saying, well, I'm not going to follow the law of the rabbis. It's not the law of the rabbis. And it's not like you're saying it's like the law of the rabbis. Rabbis made this up. But it's not. Again, how long does it take to write a Torah? Genuinely, how long?
Depends how much time a day you put to it.
So when Moses was up 40 days and 40 nights, it took him that long to read the Torah and understand what God was saying. It took him that long.
I mean, he wasn't even writing the entire Torah at that point. He was writing certain portions of that time, but we don't know what he was doing there. There was, he was communing with God for 40 days and 40
And
nights.
commuting, an oral transmission that shows you how to
Or
keep the
that,
law.
yeah, of course. Yeah, again, that's where the logic just completely disintegrates into propaganda, where of course Moses was on the mountain absorbing the oral Torah, like
That's why, by the way, we've kept the traditions for
it's not
thousands of years.
even it's not even
That's why we have a 2,000-year-old menorah that was kept the same way as it is now. Because the only thing that is actually preserved,
you know
the
that
only
the
system.
instructions for the menorah are written in the Torah. You know that, right?
No, I mean the Chanukiah for Hanukkah, the way we light them.
A Chanukiah? What is the Chanukiah? The 8 branch candle that was made for Hasmonean propaganda.
That's what propaganda. So you don't believe the miracle happened, right? You deny that?
Well, I don't really know. I mean, they won the Greeks. I suppose that's a good thing. The Jews won the Greeks, so that's it.
You see, you're devout of knowledge. I suppose this happened, so therefore, like if God again, like
Yeah, I wasn't there. I don't know if the thing burned for 8 days, but the reality is you're definitely not obligated to celebrate that as a holiday. And again, for all of your talk about the rabbis not adding laws, when you pick up the Hanukkah candle and say, "Blessed are you, God, who commanded me to do this," that's another way of saying, "Blessed are you, Rebbe, who commanded me to do this." When you wash your hands before bread, that's a made-up commandment. When you wash your hands in the morning, it's a made-up commandment. Going to the mikvah is a made-up commandment. Again, shechita is a made-up commandment.
they're
We
not
can go on
made
and on.
up.
Yes, they are not in the Torah. The only
Doesn't mean
basis
they're made
for
up. Just
believing
like
in them, the only
if they're
basis
not
for
in the
believing in
Torah,
them,
if they're
the
not
only
in the Torah,
bas-
it doesn't mean they're made up.
the only basis for believing in them is believing the rabbis claim that their laws that they're telling you in their own name are originally coming from some secret special tradition that goes to Sinai.
That's
And
why it's all preserved by
that is a,
that's why all the Jewish communities, whether in Ethiopia, whether you're anywhere, all the traditions are preserved. There's a reason because of that. But you don't think
it's
people would
been
start.
Orthodox Judaism for 2,000 years. I'm aware of that. That's been Orthodox Judaism. This has been the practices, and I disagree with it. I think it has caused 2,000 years of Jewish exile. I think it's been, again, the destruction of Judaism. I think that we need to return to God and stop following all this man-made propaganda.
I think you have to wake up to understand why there's like no Karaites. Like why like no one follows it. It's a broken system that is lack of explanation, that has yet to produce anything, by the way. They don't produce anything. There's no writings, no deeper understanding, no communities, there's nothing. There's no system of prayer. It's like we'll do what we want to do. We'll subjectively follow the Torah. So we'll take this and say it means this instead of actually following the preserved system that was orally transmitted. Instead of following the prophets, we deny the prophets. See, the prophets don't exist. These are all subjective things that you guys want to choose. So look, you can do that, but I'm just saying when you look at reality about what Judaism is, it's not being a Karaite. It's not biblical only. It's not that. It's Orthodox Judaism, which has existed from the dawn of time until now and will never end. And there's a reason because
Definitely not the dawn of time, but yeah, yes, you are correct in saying that the Judaism, preserved religious Jews are mostly Orthodox. And I'll repeat to you, do not follow the majority for evil, do not follow the majority to pervert the law. The
It's not the
crowd of
majority.
Jews, the crowd of Jews who are acting this way are not acting in line with God. All of these prayer systems and these organized belief systems and all of these rituals and all of these traditions are not commanded by God.
They
You do
didn't
not have to
prophets.
do any of them. You do not have to do any of them. And any prophet that is in any way contradicting the narrative of the Torah is not valid, or at least that statement is not valid and may have been introduced to the text later on by rabbis or something like that.
Well, again, like when looking at your system, this is what I see. Like when like looking at to follow your system, I see
It's not my system, it's the system of the Torah.
no, it's your system. That's why there's no Karaites. So there's a reason they're not around anymore because no one.
Again, I will repeat to you,
So
do not follow the majority to do evil. I
and go
don't
to your judges
if
at your
you are
time.
the only person in the world. You cannot continue to point to the fact that there isn't a big group of Karaite Jews to then say that the
I
Torah is
can
not true.
because they
No,
don't
you
exist.
no,
There's a
you
reason they don't exist.
not. Yeah,
They're not.
even if not one Jew in the world existed who followed the Torah, it would still be the right thing to do because that's the standard that the Torah presents. The Torah presents the standard. This is what God spoke to Moses.
Yes,
This is
go to
what
your
we,
judges at the time.
again,
And your assumption is, well, if there's no temple, that means the knowledge is just gone. The
yeah,
knowledge that
if there's no temple, then there is no authority of a high court who has the ability to decide law in the way that
okay,
uh, Deuteronomy
so
14 or whatever it is, tells you.
so that
Uh,
there is like again, you're still saying that like if that were
not, because
true,
the Torah says you should listen to what they tell you from the place that God chooses. So it turns
so
out that there is no high court right now, and the reality is that there is a splintered court. People just talking in the air. They have no actual legal power, no ability to enforce law.
if that were true, that it's where that it's just where God chooses when there's a temple, then why is it that Hosea predicts a way to follow in a time of exile?
I mean, it just sounds like you like to regurgitate the same arguments and you want to go in circles. I already told
Time
you.
of prophets, it's
Either Hosea is giving a option of how to connect to God. I don't think he's actually undermining the original commandments and saying that you could fulfill these commandments truly. But if that is what he's saying, then he's wrong because God has already presented how he wants his commandments to be fulfilled. So,
or you don't
man,
understand the verse and
no
you're trying to
man,
effectively interpret it because that's what it sounds like. Either it's this or it's this. I don't know. Either work is this
either
or
it's in line with the Torah and it's true, or it's contrary to the Torah and it's not true.
so. As I said before, what is work? What is your place? Tell me so I know how to keep the Sabbath.
Work is the things that you do 6 days to fund your life, to keep things going. It's all of the work that you do to produce your actions, all of your endeavors that you do throughout the week on
So anything
the
I do, anything in a 6 day week is considered work.
no, the things that you do for work. And then on the seventh day, you need to stay in your place, not leave, not cook, not burn fires, and basically not do much. And just
Wait, if work is defined by what you said, how is cooking work?
because there's an explicit commandment that you should have your food cooked on the sixth day.
But what? But is that work though, or no?
It's a separate commandment. There's an explicit commandment about work and about leaving your place and about burning a fire. So it's creating additional guidelines on how to make your Sabbath very restful and to the point where you're not doing many actions whatsoever.
So where can I leave? How far do I have to go?
Don't leave your place. You have to be honest about that.
Does that mean my house? Does that mean my city? Does that
It
mean
doesn't
my
say your house, but it says your place. Your city would be a good place to start. But again, sometimes cities are very big. So, maybe it's your neighborhood, would probably be
there's a
a
ton of
better,
maybe.
more reasonable understanding.
There's a ton of maybes, and this leads to a problem because you have all those maybes, and you can violate the law without knowing. So like, let's start with the city. God knows what He knows. I don't know what I know. I'm an ignorant human being who doesn't know anything. So God knows where that domain is. He just decided not to tell me. So because He decided not to tell me, I'm not going to know where I go to violate what happens. Like you see, like you literally can't keep the law. You don't know unless you're saying I should stay in my house the whole day. You're saying
Well,
that.
maybe if you're so doubtful, then you should just stay in your house.
Yeah, see, like, so are you doubtful like that or no?
I'm not doubtful. That's why I'll take a walk. but I don't get in the car and drive places. I don't go on a 10-mile hike. I don't go like I actually do stay very close to my house, and I don't go anywhere.
So
And the
what's
holiday is different, by the way. The holiday, you're allowed to burn fire, you're allowed to leave your place, you're allowed to cook. So the holiday is different than the Sabbath. But the Sabbath has extreme limitation on activity, even again, just from this phrase, sit on your ass and do not get up. That like don't leave your place. Sit on your ass and don't leave your place.
you
That's it.
leave though? Come on, you leave though.
Well, I don't leave my place, as in I stay in an extremely restful state, and I don't actually go out and go
You walk
places and do
outside.
things.
You walk
Yeah,
outside. So you don't
but
sit
that's
on
still my place.
your ass all day. So
No, you're right. I think that's going to be a bit more metaphorical in that understanding. Like
so
sit on
you're
your ass,
getting
don't go
into
anywhere.
you're getting into it. I'm trying to like say this because you're getting into subjective understanding. That's what it's becoming in. That my version of the Torah can be different than your version
I
of the
guess
Torah.
the rabbi's subjective opinion is superior to mine.
Well, it's not
I don't
subjective. It's
believe that. Well,
objective.
it is subjective. That's what you don't want to see. What you don't want to see is that the rabbis are doing exactly what we're doing right now. They're having a subjective conversation about the verses in the Torah, and they're coming to conclusions, and they're telling you that you need to follow their subjective conclusions.
They
Oh, it's
mastered
exactly
Mishnah.
2,000 cubits, right?
They mastered the
That's a
Torah. They mastered Kabbalah. Me and you have
right.
not done any of that.
So
So I would
again, that's you having blind faith in what they claim to have
How's that not
mastered.
good?
That's you saying that they have mastered so much that their opinions are just more valid than mine.
So
I
when
don't
the
believe
Vilna
that. At
Gaon, so when the
the
Vilna
end of the
Gaon got
day,
up at 6 years old, so when the Vilna Gaon got up at 6 years old and said the whole Torah front to
Mhm.
back at 6 years old in front of the Bima,
it still doesn't mean that his opinion is unquestionable.
doesn't mean he's special. Any type of way.
Assuming that the story is even true, yes, it means he is special. But you know what? It still doesn't mean that he can tell you what to do, and it still doesn't mean that you cannot question his opinion, and it still doesn't mean that his opinion is ultimately not a human subjective opinion. And
It
so
does
I
if
just
the
like
judges.
no,
It,
no, it doesn't. And again, you are placing these people on a pedestal to the extent that you would be willing to obey their subjective conclusions and believe that
yeah,
everything that
it's
they're
not
saying is coming from God. And you know what? That
like,
strikes me as being
have you read anything? Like honestly, have you read any?
I read anything.
Yeah,
What
have you read anything from the Vilna Gaon from like any of these people? So you
yes,
even know what you're talking.
absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. I'm
Okay, so
familiar with the
tell me
work.
how tell me how the Vilna Gaon holds on, for example, of evaluating the Arizal statements.
That's
You-
a very random question, and I'm not deeply read on his correspondence with the Arizal. The point is, though, I'm aware that ultimately all of these rabbis are in lockstep with the orthodoxy and the fundamental rulings of the Talmud and Maimonides and the Shulchan Aruch, and they're really just speaking, to each other, trying to create this system of Judaism that
There's
everyone
a
needs
reason
to
why they
follow.
produce people with abilities. Like again, you make the argument, well, ability doesn't matter. If you're a false prophet, you're taking people off the path. You can make that opinion. But the fact is, if that sect is the only one that produces that, not because they're false prophets, if it were like one or two, let's say there were one or two people who had those abilities, you can make that argument that they were gifted that by God to turn you away from the path or using foreign things to turn you away from the path. If that sect is the one that produces all of them, the Rebbe, Rav Kaduri, Baba Sali, the Meni Shchai, all it's like from generation to generation. Always, and you never see it in any other system. You don't see it in reform, you don't see it in conservative, any Karaite movement. You just don't see it. They're not produced. And there's a reason they're not produced, is because they're not the correct movement. The one that is correct will be the ones that produce and have these abilities.
I don't disagree that reform is wrong. I don't even disagree that the Karaites would be wrong to the extent that they have a lot of their own subjective interpretations that they turn into law. I don't believe that subjective interpretations of human beings should be turned into law to either add or subtract to it. But the reality is, you keep bringing up miracle workers as proof of truth, and I will continue to tell you that doing miracles does not prove the truth of what you're saying.
It
The
does though.
standard that we have is the Torah. The
It
standard
does.
that we have is God's revelation in the five books of Moses, and anyone who deviates from that in any which way is not a valid prophet. They're not a
And
valid
if God gives
miracle
divinity to
worker.
people, so if God gives divinity to people who do the oral Torah, you don't see divinity give it to anyone else. So they're given to the people who follow the oral Torah only. That doesn't say anything.
No,
See, that's ridiculous, by the way.
it's not ridiculous because
So why don't you have any ability?
The Torah itself supports the view that people exercising divine powers is not the standard for truth.
And so your standard
The Torah presents that as the way to identify true prophets. Creating miracles,
doing all these things. That's not what dictates a true prophet. So and here's the thing. Here's the thing, though. You can't tell me the standard. Like you keep saying, like
I tell you this, the standard is
you
what the
didn't.
Torah says.
What is work? What is leaving your place? What are any of these? What is that?
Again, you can continue to act like I've given you no response whatsoever. I've given you very reasonable responses. Have I given you conclusive, exact how many steps you can take? No, because I'm not a fucking liar. Okay. I'm
No,
not going to
because you use an
pretend like you can derive from the text.
educated
Second,
guess.
I'm not going to pretend that you can derive from the text an exact amount of steps that you can take.
No, because you
You
use
could
an
derive from the
educated
text.
guess. Let's just guess based off. So I can guess what I want to guess. You can guess what you want to guess, and they're somehow both right. Let's use subjective following of the law. That's ridiculous.
I mean,
And you
it's
just,
not ridiculous because the law doesn't give an objective standard. If the law said,
it
do
is an
not
oral
walk,
law.
if the law said, do not walk 2,000 cubits, then you couldn't walk 2,000 cubits. But if the law just says, don't leave your place, well, then that's anywhere from your couch to, the end of your neighborhood. But you
Wait, so
have,
wait, you leave your couch though.
yeah, I know. So I'm saying you have to be honest with that judgment.
So are
You have
you
to,
honest with that judgment?
yes, I do my best to be honest.
So if it says don't leave your place, and like you said, sit your ass down,
Mhm.
then how does that? How are you doing that if you're leaving the
Because I
place?
do sit my ass down for the majority of time, and even if I get up, I don't leave my
Oh
place.
wait, so now it's for the majority. Now it's not always.
It says, sit on your ass and don't leave your place. So I take that to mean just stay where you are and don't leave.
So you take that. So
Mhm.
you see how other people may
Hey,
take
look,
it.
if you wanted to sit on your ass all day, props to you. All right.
So
I think that,
see how
I
you're
think that,
subtracting things. You're like you're making things based off of your
oh,
mind.
that's not true. It's because there's a reasonable understanding that the phrase sit on your ass is like a form of speech, like stay where you are, right? If I say like stay where you are, don't get up, or it's actually says stay where you are and don't leave your place. That's just like a command that you got to stay in this space. You shouldn't leave
Yeah,
this.
and yet you can't tell me what that place is, so it's vague and it's a problem. You understand how it's a problem. If I have a community of biblical observant Jews who only follow biblical Judaism,
Yeah.
and they don't know whether they're breaking the law or not because you don't know what a place is. That's a problem. If you don't know what that place is, then you can mistakenly break the law, which would mean God would now, you get to sin now. God, you would be violating the law of not working on the Sabbath. But by the way, is deserving of death, according to the Torah. So I deserve to die now because I didn't know what the place was.
We definitely wouldn't be able to put you to death on account of a doubt, right? So that's clear. So we'd have to have certainty that like you did something that was obviously worthy of death. So like if you got up on your car and just left, went for a road trip like that, we can reliably say you left your place. But to the extent that there's a doubt, then you have to let that sit in the gray area and let that be your judgment with God. Remember, some of the laws in the Torah don't even have penalties. Ultimately, you can't even convict someone unless you have witnesses. So the majority of your behavior and your observance is a personal relationship between you and God, and you have to be honest in your own personal life and in your relations with God, especially at a time like this where there is no court who implements these laws, where there is no
That's a problem
community.
because
One second, where there is no community that actually implements this and actually lives this way. So
there
you,
is,
you
but okay.
need to act as an individual and be honest with God.
You want to establish your own. So if we were going by your standard, let's go to Israel, let's establish a biblical court. Let's
Mhm.
do it. We establish that court, and that court makes the rulings. Who is righteous enough or who is smart enough to tell me what that place is when I think the place is this? So let's say someone observes me leaving my place, but for me, my place is the city. For them, the place is my house. Who are they to tell me that's not my place?
Mhm.
How do you answer that?
Right. I mean, again, like we would have to have judges who are righteous, who do not accept bribes, who are men of truth, who fear God.
What makes
Uh,
them righteous? And what makes them judges? What like because again, you know the biblical Torah, I can tell that. So if I also know the biblical Torah, what makes you more righteous than me? Or what makes you more worthy to be a judge than I do? See, for us, for
has
it's
to
like
do with stature. It has to do with stature. It has to do with position. It has to do with what position are you in life. Very often, it should be elders, people who have extensive knowledge in the Torah, who have life experience. Again, the Torah gives standards: men of truth, men who fear God, men who don't accept bribes, right? And so we're talking about men who are trustworthy. who either the community appoints or they're appointed through God. And another thing again to consider is that we do need God in a lot of these areas. We need God in order to create cohesive understanding, and that's even just again the command to go up to the place that God chooses implies if we have the place that God chooses, then we have God's presence in our midst. We have the Urim Vitumim, which is the lights and the perfections. We have the priest, we have the anointed ones. There is a world in which we have God in our presence, and we're actually given answers to these questions. But the response to doubt and to questions is not just let's make up responses or give ultimate authority to a leading group of people who, again, have
Not
demonstrated.
making up, though. You keep saying making up. It's
Well, it is.
reversing what has been orally transmitted for thousands of years. To say it's making up,
Made it up.
you would have to give me an alternative then.
It can't be made up thousands of years ago and then orally transmitted.
And somehow all of them follow it the same way. It was
How all
fabricated,
them follow it because
it
it
was
benefits.
fabricated. They all agreed to it. So it was fabricated. Everyone agreed to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
That's
again,
ridiculous. What kind of claim is that?
ridiculous
Just like
that
the prophets are
governing,
fabricated according to
governing.
you. You believe that? The prophets are
I
fabricated.
don't say the prophets are fabricated. I said maybe some of the lines in the prophets are fabricated,
And what's your evidence based off of that?
that they contradict the Torah. If things in the prophets contradict the Torah, it either implies that the prophet is invalid or that there was some tampering with the writing.
Or it's not contradictory. You just don't understand the Torah. You don't understand the difference between exile and in redemption. The different states that how you keep the law. Because
Torah
those are very
never
different
implies
things.
that there's a change in the law due to exile. You'd have to come up with a Torah source that says when you're in exile, there will be different ways to observe the law. Torah never says that. So you're stuck with the original law, what the Torah said, and you have to implement it to the best of your ability.
Except like you don't know how to keep it though. That's the problem.
I do.
You
I do
don't.
the best of my ability. And again, I'm perfectly open to communities of people getting together and trying to keep the Torah to the best of their ability too. And that's how we again achieve redemption is through people returning to God along with their
Okay,
family.
it's very late for me now. I just want to say I enjoyed the discussion. It was good hearing your view. Um,
All right.
but
Well, I wish you success with your journey and
I also wish that you look into more these leaders and what they've done, what they given in the Torah, their innovations that have been beautiful insights into how to observe and really follow the oral Torah.
yeah. And
I
again,
hope
my
that,
advice to you would be to read the written Torah without commentary and then notice just how many things have been added to the original narrative of the Torah. And by the time you reach the end of Deuteronomy and you've realized how many things have been hoisted and put onto you by the authority of men, you tell me if that's something you're still willing to follow.
okay, great. Are you able to send me the recording by the way?
Yeah, sure.
Great.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you. It's
Absolutely.
great.
All right. Have a good night.